Faz o ding-dong. Onde é que está o Michael? E agora onde é que está o Michael? Então faça lá o ding-dong, por favor. Onde é que está o Michael? Bom dia a todos. Sejam muito bem-vindos ao FLAD Forum on Portugal and USA Higher Education. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the forum. Please note that on the screen you have the password to access the Wi-Fi here, as well as the QR code if you need to download the program. Opening remarks now by Professor Michael Baum, member of the board of FLAD. There was a slight change in the order, so we're going to hear now from Michael Baum, followed by the Deputy Chief of Mission of the U.S. Embassy in Lisbon, Mr. Douglas Konev. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Bem-vindos, welcome this morning. I'm hoping my voice actually is going to allow me to get through this. I apologize for the late start. We were waiting for our president, who apparently is on his way, but we're going to change the order, as Paula mentioned, especially because our Deputy Chief of Mission has a very, very busy schedule. So, Mr. Deputy Chief of Mission, Douglas Konev, the Professora Salva Castelo Branco, our other invited guests and speakers who are here today. Also, I want to recognize FLAD's institutional partners, not just from the U.S. Embassy, but from the Fulbright Commission, from the Institut Camões. I think we may have some folks from Camões here, the Erasmus Plus National Agency. FCT was planning to be here today, but at the last minute they couldn't join us. My colleague, Professor Elsa Henriques, who's here, also is going to be saying a few words about the partnership that FLAD has with FCT and UC Berkeley. You'll be hearing about that in a little bit. And especially to all of you, many of you who took the time out of your busy schedules to come down here and spend an entire day with us, many of you from Porto, Coimbra, Viana do Castelo, from all over the country. So we're very happy you could do it. I'm going to try and keep my welcome remarks very brief. I was kind of sort of planning that this would be based on our president's discussion. So let me see if I can reorient a little bit. In terms of one of the things you're going to be hearing about today, and I'm not going to talk a lot about it now because we'll have an opportunity at the end of the day to talk about a very special project we have here at FLAD that many of you already know, which is the SIPN project, the Study in Portugal Network. We're actually celebrating the 10th anniversary of SIPN. The MOU was signed in October of 14. And I'm pretty sure we have all four members of the SIPN project, the consortium, are here with us today. And I was wondering if they could just stand up and be recognized. University of Lisbon. Folks from the University of Lisbon. Oh, come on, stand up. Oh, look how many. All right, fantastic. Excellent. Católica. I know we have Católica in the house. All right. Nova, Universidade Nova de Lisboa. All right, fantastic. And finally, Universidade de Lisboa, I already mentioned. Iscate, where's Iscate? There we are. All right, Iscate in the house. Fantastic. So, thank you. It's sort of a proud moment for me. It's been 10 years in the making, and later on today we'll do the sort of formal pat on the back, I guess, sort of showing you some numbers, what we think our impact has been. So, I kind of wanted to just use my remarks as a chance to address, why does FLAD care so much about the internationalization of higher education in Portugal? Don't we have enough foreigners in town already? Some of you may be saying. Secondly, how does Portugal compare to other EU states in terms of its convergence story, in terms of its higher ed system? And the reason why I mentioned this latter question is that I know we have a lot of invited speakers today coming from the United States or elsewhere who don't know a lot about the Portuguese higher ed system, right? My good friend Joel, for example. So I thought it might be useful to kind of just give a very quick snapshot of sort of, where we are and from where Portugal has come. As you probably know, Portugal had very, very low levels of overall education that plagued the country for decades after the transition to democracy. This was largely a result of Salazar's, disdain for educating the population beyond, say, the fourth grade or so. When Portugal joined in '86, joined the EU, its scientific system was, in fact, deeply backward. It was far from the European average on almost all the metrics of investment, scientific production, the number of PhDs that are being produced, et cetera. Fortunately, that story has changed incredibly quickly. In fact, I often talk about this in my classes. If there's one country in the world that has probably had a faster socio-economic modernization than Portugal, the only country I could probably think of would be South Korea. But I would probably have Portugal in second place. And the education story is very much a part of that. 97 was when FCT was created, which is Portugal's National Science Foundation. And there was very much kind of a new focus on the educational convergence of Portugal with European norms. At the macro level, and again, I'm not going to try and harangue you with too many statistics here, but I'm going to at least give you a few. At the macro level, it's been really pretty remarkable. The share of 25 to 34-year-olds who now have tertiary educational attainment increased from 33% in 2015, and today it's 44% as of 2022. Also, another important story that all of us who teach in the Portuguese universities see every day, 65% of university graduates now are women. This is a remarkable change from where Portugal was, let's say, even in the 1980s. Soon, who knows, we may need some affirmative action for men in Portugal, given the dominance of women. In terms of what Portugal spends on education overall, it's very much in line with European norms. It's about 5% of GDP. That's about the OECD average. In terms of funding for education in absolute terms, just like everywhere else, it's very much a factor of the country's income levels. So countries with higher per capita GDP, of course, tend to spend more per student than those with lower per capita GDP. And so, as you might predict, Portugal does spend less at the tertiary level per student than the OECD average. The share of educational spending that's devoted to tertiary is also somewhat lower here than the OECD average. It's about 25% compared to 29. Talking about internationalization, FCT, I would say starting late 90s, early 2000s, was very much focused on internationalization through PhD training. There was a big focus on getting PhDs overseas to do their grants. So that, for example, in 2001, about 55% of all PhD grantees were doing their degrees abroad. That figure today is only 5%. And you might say, wow, that's a pretty dramatic drop in internationalization. But it also has to do with a dramatic rise in PhDs, made in Portugal, right? And so it was a different time then, and clearly times have changed today. If we look a little bit more broadly at the internationalization story beyond PhD level training or below PhD level training, I think it's interesting to look at the pre and post-pandemic numbers. So less than 4% of Portuguese tertiary students were enrolled abroad, whereas international students made up 5% of the total tertiary students in Portugal in 2017. This is before the pandemic. So Portugal actually had about 1.4 international students for every national student abroad. There was a little bit of brain gain, you could say, that was happening among tertiary students. Since then, the share of international students at the tertiary level was not negatively affected by COVID, as the share of internationals went from 10% of all tertiary students in 19 to actually 12% in 21. And by the way, this is just degree seekers. We're not talking here, we're not including the numbers of mobility students and Erasmus students. We're just talking about degree seekers. This story I'm telling you, is primarily about those who are here, doing international education, but it doesn't tell you a lot about what's happening after students graduate. And this is one of the big challenges that I know for our Portuguese folks here. I'm telling you, I'm preaching to the choir. You already know about this. But one of the big challenges for Portugal is how to keep, the highly educated young people who have finished their licenciaturas or finished their master's degrees and keep them in Portugal, right? Portugal is a relatively poor economy on Europe's periphery, and it's always going to face the challenge of keeping its best and brightest here at home. But this is something that we think that internationalization and bringing in some new global talent is something that may be able to play a part in helping to create some higher paying jobs that are going to keep some of these folks here. The second thing I would mention, and this is a real big challenge for Portugal, is the demographic cliff. Again, for our U.S. folks, this is going to also sound kind of familiar. The demographic challenge is real for Portugal. The generation that entered university now, this year, was born in 2006. In that year, Portugal had a little over 105,000 babies, 4,000 less than the year before. In 2010, only 101,000 babies were born in Portugal. And in 13 and 14, that number went down to 82,000 babies, okay? So in other words, we can expect a slow decline in the number of applicants to higher ed here in Portugal over the next 4 years. But then we're gonna see a very sharp cliff with about a 15 to 20% drop in the 4 years after that. And this is a huge challenge for a Portuguese higher ed system that, at least by some measures, is slightly, let's say, over-dimensioned, I think might be the proper word, for a country of this size. At least that's according to the OECD. FLAD SIPN program, which most of you are familiar with, was kind of, at least in some ways, designed to sort of address at least a part of that challenge. And so, there's a lot of issues that SIPN is not well positioned to address: the student housing crisis, the problem of the CO2 that educational mobility struggles with. But what we're trying to do with the SIPN project is use those as teachable moments for our students while they're here, to try and make them more reflective about their consumption choices while they're in country. And this brings me back, to why internationalization and what's the purpose of this forum. I think, I'm not going to talk about all the, the goals of breaking down nationalist barriers for what are increasingly global problems, and the importance of intercultural education. I know I'm preaching to the choir if I were to talk about that stuff, but I think it's important to remember this demographic issue, the role that U.S. students can help to play in bringing in some new revenues, for the Portuguese universities. I think also it's an important, I look at my own classroom with Erasmus students, American students, and Portuguese students all learning together, so a more diversified classroom. It's a really fun place to teach. Secondly, I think increasingly the Portuguese graduate programs see that foreign students are, a major source of their recruitment. And I think bringing in undergraduate students is a way in some ways to introduce them to the quality of the graduate programs that exist here. Secondly, I think, again, our American speakers will know that the foreign students are out-of-state students, right? And the same is now true in Portugal. Non-nationals pay a higher fee to take courses here. And so this is also an important revenue enhancement model. SIPN, we did a little bit of math, and in the last 10 years, we've generated over 600,000 euros to the 4 universities that are our partner schools of the SIPN project. And that's just, on the Portuguese side, the D in FLAD, if you will, desenvolvimento. Our panelists, I think, are going to say a lot more about the U.S. side, and so I'm eager to hear what they're going to tell us about the factors that are driving education abroad. Anyways, I'm gonna keep this. I know Doug has a very full agenda. I'm gonna skip some of this. I just want to take the moment to say that this forum is a labor of love. It's something that we're now going to try and do every 2 years. And I think, I don't want to be the boss who doesn't take the time to thank the people who really make this happen, right? So let me take a moment. I want to embarrass them and make them stand up. So first, let me just give a shout out to, number one, Ricardo Pereira. Where's Ricardo? Ricardo. There he is. All right. He's the coordinator for the education area, the veritable right-hand man. Keeps me on my toes at all times. Paula Vicente, where are you, Paula? All right, she's out. See, she's so busy she can't even be in the room. She's the savviest master of protocol that the FLAD has ever had. Sylvia Carrillo. Sylvia's here in the room. Program coordinator for SIPN. Genesis, where's Genesis? She was one who gave you all of your badges on the way in. Program coordinator for SIPN, our talented data viz specialist, and very much a special piece of the puzzle. There she is. Also our resident poet and barista. And Waze Sadek, who is our newest member of the team. Where he is, Waze. Waze, you may not know, is a former, a displaced international student, Syrian, who has been in Portugal for a number of years, and we were very, very happy to be able to bring him onto the team. And he's an essential part of the team now. So I just want to thank you guys for all the hard work you put in to help make today possible. So thanks. All right. I think that's enough, and then I think we'll turn it over. I'll give the floor to Doug, and now I see the president of FLAD, Nuno Moraes Sarmento. He's here and he's joined us, and so maybe we'll just reverse the order. After Doug, Nuno can come up and say a few words. All right? I know, Doug, you have to leave this. So, so please join us. Okay. Thank you.
Good morning, bon dia. Thank you, Michael, for your introduction. Thank you for this opportunity. I also want to thank the president of FLAD, Nuno Moraes Sarmento, for hosting this fantastic event today. For those of you who are from out of town, and I don't think there are that many of you, welcome to Portugal, a place known for its rich history, its inviting culture, vinho verde, fado, porco preto, bacalhau, that I've come to love very much in the last year. But especially, as Michael said, a strong commitment to education. So I'm very happy to be with you today. Internationalizing education really didn't come on my radar until I got to university. I remember we had a Rotary Club exchange when I was in high school. We had a guy who became a friend of mine, but this kid from Porto Alegre in Brazil came to New Jersey, and you can imagine what it was like for a kid from Brazil to go through a winter in New Jersey. It was not fun, but it really came on my radar when I was in university, way back when, 1979, when politics intersected with education. It was when the Shah of Iran came to the United States for medical treatment, and all of a sudden, a bunch of Iranian students who were at my university could no longer go home. The Ayatollah had cut off links, and so these kids were stranded, and quite a number of us who had gotten to know them helped make arrangements, whether it was where to spend Thanksgiving or where to spend the holidays. But for me, that was the first time that education really became international in a sense, and so it's one reason why I'm very happy to be with you today. As Michael said, you all know better than me, better than most, how these international exchanges enrich people in so many ways, and so I won't get into that, but I want to talk a little bit about the programs that we have that are opportunities. And a lot is going on between the United States and Portugal. Our tech and our research sectors have long been intertwined. It's a win-win for both countries. In addition to long-standing partnerships, for example, between Portuguese universities and MIT, Carnegie Mellon, and the University of Texas. All 7 of Portugal's unicorns, which are companies that are worth more than $1 billion, have deep connections to the United States in many different ways. They leverage for funding. There's knowledge sharing programs. There's all sorts of innovation that occurs thanks to these unicorns. And the success of these programs says a lot about our transatlantic partnership. Similarly, programs like visiting professorships between the U.S. and Portugal played a significant role in promoting our academic mobility. So as we look toward the future, it's really essential to see what are these new programs or what are these new emerging areas of interest. One of them is called Collaborative Online International Learning, which is a new concept that allows students and faculty to engage across borders without ever leaving home institutions. By incorporating digital platforms, and I'm guessing perhaps this was accelerated as a result of the pandemic, we facilitate cross-cultural projects. Students can work with their peers more easily and in a cost-effective manner as well. It's also important to underscore the value of exchange programs and of the government-sponsored university-level U.S.-Portugal collaborations that have been taking place for many years. The educational, the personal, the long-term benefits of participation in these exchange programs and collaborations are countless. So here are a few of those programs. Fulbright, and we've got Fulbrighters here. I love Fulbright. It's brought thousands of Portuguese students to the United States and vice versa here to Portugal with opportunities to study and teach and collaborate. And Fulbright is going to celebrate 65 years this year. I've often said that if you can put just 10 Fulbrighters in a room, you're going to cure cancer, you're going to solve a lot of the global crises around the world. So it's just an amazing program. It's true. SUSI, the study of U.S. institutes. Our academic programs designed to provide foreign undergraduate students and scholars with a deeper understanding of U.S. society, culture, and institutions. These programs are hosted by various U.S. universities, and they focus on specific themes like journalism, public policy, and religious pluralism. The Gilman Scholarship Program provides grants to U.S. undergraduate students of limited financial means to enable them to study or intern abroad and gain skills that are critical to national security, to economic competitiveness. The program aims to diversify the kinds of students who study and intern abroad and the countries and regions to which they go. As Michael mentioned, SIPN, the Study in Portugal Network. Through SIPN, FLAD is helping to increase the flow of students and ideas between our two countries, really enriching both of our academic environments. Let me wrap this up with a practical reason why internationalizing education is so important. As Michael alluded to, there is a global war for talent and skilled labor. Why? Because the people are aging, we talked about demographics, and retiring from the workforce, and because birth rates are going down. So to be competitive, companies and countries need to produce university graduates and postgraduates in tech, biotech, aerospace, infrastructure, supply chains, renewable energies. In Costa Rica and Panama, for example, two countries who want to grow their semiconductor industries, there's just not enough qualified labor. At the same time, countries like Portugal are looking for innovative ways to take care of their populations. A prime example is the Guimarães Hospital's new partnership with Harvard Medical School to integrate new technology into patient care and doctor training. So that's why it's so important why schools like that are here today, as well as Católica, have partnerships with University of Florida or Boston College, Nova with Texas Tech and UMass Boston. I know University of Lisboa has partnerships. I'm going to say it wrong. Isquete? Isquetec. Okay, has partnerships as well. I went to their American Corner just a couple of weeks ago. I mean, for God's sake, they're making nano satellites. I mean, it's just incredible, the abilities and the skills here. So looking ahead, I encourage our Portuguese university partners to continue thinking creatively about new projects and partnerships with U.S. institutions. There's tremendous potential in deepening these relationships, whether it's through joint research, student exchanges, or online learning programs. The mutual benefits are clear. Students gain global perspectives, institutions build stronger research networks, and nations develop closer ties through shared academic pursuits. So thank you very much. I wish you all a wonderful day. It's going to be a great program. I wish you could be here to listen to it as well, but it's going to be very enriching. Thank you.
So first of all, good morning to you to you all. Yeah. Get a bit lost. Okay. So, good morning to you all. First of all, good morning to the guest speakers, but also to all the attendees, the ones in presence and ones in person, and the colleagues that are joining us online. I would say welcome to the second edition of FLAD Forum on Portugal and USA Higher Education. And I would say, Michael, you have to find a more trendy name, because when we finish the name. Anyway, it's a great pleasure to host you all here at FLAD, and it's a joy to see, thinking about last edition, the number, more than 100 higher education professionals that signed up for this event and that coming from different universities and polytechnics from the Algarve, from Lisbon, from Évora, from Coimbra, from Porto and Setúbal. And ever since its inception, FLAD always promoted and tries to continuously doing so, promoted the development of Portugal through the bilateral relations with the United States, with education and the promotion, in particular the promotion of Portuguese higher education internationalization being a cornerstone activity of our organization. Today, we'll be hearing from specialists in the internationalization of higher education from both Portugal and United States. And the aim is not different from sharing experiences, sharing knowledge, sharing good practices with representatives of higher education institutions here in Portugal. And this conference is another step taken in FLAD's strong commitment to the internationalization of the Portuguese higher education, which has been implemented through a vast number of important initiatives made available to universities, professors, researchers, and students, and trying, by doing so, to contribute to the country's development and bringing both sides of the Atlantic together. So I will just point some of the FLAD initiatives along these last years that have benefited people and organizations in this field. First of all, we have SIPAN, but I'm not going to say anymore. Michael just underlined his baby, which is SIPAN. SIPAN is, I think, is the 10th anniversary of SIPAN that we will be celebrating today, later. So, second, the USA-Portugal campus, and that's an initiative that brings together FLAD, Fulbright, and the National Erasmus Agency. And the idea is, again, to combine resources and know-how to promote greater knowledge on both sides of the Atlantic on the education systems used. Third place, and that's an important one for us, it has been the pavilion at NAFSA that we co-sponsor. And that has been a way, and we hope will go on being a way, for for the participation of Portuguese higher education institutions and being, as you all know, the first event worldwide in this matter. We will learn more and dedicate some time to the roadmap to NAFSA 25 still this morning. Fourth, the UP High Ensino Superior, a FLAD program that selects and finances innovative collaborative projects between higher education institutions in Portugal and in the United States. And we want to underline that we are very pleased for having received 27 highly merited applications that simultaneously reflect the quality of work that Portuguese universities are developing, and at the same time their interest in further cooperation with the United States. The selected projects will be announced at the closing of this forum. Additionally, FLAD continues to provide grants to US-based scholars, such as FLAD Torre do Tombo, which are the National Archives of Portugal, and a recent grant line that allows for applicants to apply to any archival site in Portugal, including the mainland and the islands of Açores and Madeira. Last but not least, FLAD sponsors go on sponsoring. It has been doing so for at least 20 years. Faculty positions in the US at Brown University, Georgetown, Dartmouth, and Maslowa. However, the challenges on this particular field of Portuguese higher education are, as it has been pointed previously, are difficult ones to overcome. First of all, demography. We all know the Portuguese situation that was explained some minutes ago. But we have demographic problems, we have economic problems, we have financial problems and others concerning putting together all the different pieces that we have to organize for this purpose. And I'd say that we are in one of those moments when facing all these challenges, and in Portugal there are significant challenges, we can, considering those challenges, considering the uncertainty that we are living in terms of global situation, in terms of peace and war in different parts of the world, concerning the uncertainty that we have in our future presently, therefore the growing difficulty to focus young students in programs like this one when there are so unstable environments around them. So that's one of those moments where we have two alternatives. One is to just stop, just let it go, just see what happens. And the result of that way will be slowly all the initiatives that we have been speaking about will stop as well. And we will go back in the long road that we have crossed so far. The other alternative, and that's the one we prefer, is to see all those challenges as also moments where we can either stop or move forward, either believe really in what we are doing and the need of those partnerships, of those work together, of those ways to come together and not to separate anymore. And by believing in that, to make an even greater effort and commitment to achieve our goals. That's where we are. We take the second alternative. And if we go on under that line, maybe international student streams can be one of the mechanisms to overcome all this uncertainty, all these doubts, all these anxieties, and therefore a way to overcome some of the challenges we face. And anyway, it will represent an effort to export and at the same time attract global talent and know-how to Portugal. At the same time, Portuguese students and researchers who invest their time abroad, particularly in the advanced research laboratories and learning centers of American institutions, will return with experiences and networks that have been proving to encourage economic and social innovation in Portugal. As a community, let's continue to evolve these connections with our US higher education counterparts, as the benefits of internationalization for Portugal are many and important. And I believe that the level of expertise and knowledge present in this room will make possible for all of us to go a step further. Something I learned over the years is the result of the forums, the result of the experts' meetings just depend on themselves. If something I took from that obscure entity, which is the Bilderberg Group, is that in that group that is spoken so widely around the world, there is no secret. It's just a question of the level of participants. And if you put in a table Prime Minister, 2 Nobel Prizes, the President of the American Reserve, and some more people at that level, obviously the conversation will be able to go higher and higher. So if we believe that the result of the forums we participate in depends just on ourselves, I think that we will find together a way to do another step in this road. Thank you very much. Just to add that the works today will be closed by nothing serious, no medical aid needed. So just to add that our works today will be closed by the government, represented here by the Secretary of State of Science, that will join us to close our works. Thank you very much again.
We're going to hear now the presentation of Professor Saiba Castelo Branco.
Good morning, everyone. Bon dia. Thank you very much for this invitation to give a keynote in this important meeting. I'm truly honored to be here and to share with this in this discussion. I have to tell you that I have never been an international affairs officer. I've been a long-time faculty member in the US first and then in Portugal. I will share with you some of my trajectory, so you will hear more about it, what I've done and how. But I have to say that I embody internationalization in many ways, and also that I have practiced it in my teaching, in encouraging students to be mobile and to think beyond the horizon of their own little space or their country. So I hope that this experience will be helpful in our discussions, and I really look forward to our discussions. I think this forum is really absolutely necessary, and I'm delighted to participate in it. So, oops, this is not number 2. This is not my second slide. I don't know what is happening, but can you put slide number 2, please? Okay, there it is. Thank you. So my talk is divided into 4 parts. The internationalization of higher education in Portugal. I will give an overview of my own experience, the international end of what I've been able to collate for this talk. The internationalization of the Nova University in Lisbon. I will provide examples from two schools. My own academic trajectory and contribution to Nova's internationalization. And finally, a few modest suggestions on how we can build bridges between Portugal and USA higher education. Of course, there are many bridges already, as we've heard, but I think that perhaps some of these suggestions can solidify existing bridges and perhaps build new ones. And I think the talks that, the presentations that preceded me lay the ground very nicely to what I'm going to say. It is perhaps commonplace to think that internationalization is indispensable for the development of quality higher education, cutting-edge scientific research, and artistic creation anywhere in the world. Attracting international students, faculty, and researchers to study and work in Portugal is a necessary condition for the development of universities, their integration in networks of excellence, and the country's global development. Promoting mobility and internationalization is also a pathway toward intercultural understanding and respect, a more equitable and peaceful world, and the resolution of global problems, hopefully. An increasing number of Portuguese institutions have included internationalization as one of their priorities, especially following the adoption of the Bologna reform that was introduced in 2006 and fully implemented by the academic year 2009-2010, and the subsequent opening up of Portuguese higher education. I've witnessed that in my daily activities as a faculty member of the Nova University. Progress was also made possible by the Portuguese government's policy for higher education that potentiates internationalization, as well as, of course, the support of European exchange programs such as the Erasmus and Erasmus+, and funding agencies such as the Foundation for Science and Technology, the Gulbenkian Foundation, Fulbright, and FLAD's multiple programs for students and faculty mobility across the US and Portugal, among many others. My apologies for what I left out. According to a report published in 2022 by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, entitled Resourcing Higher Education in Portugal, that I'm sure that many of you here have read, the proportion of international students in Portuguese public universities has increased steadily over the last 2 decades. So the share of international students enrolled in bachelor's programs, thank you, increased from 8.1% in the academic year 2014-2015 to 13.1% in 2019-2020, while the increase in second cycle master's programs during the same period was from 15.2% to 27.5%. In all, in 2019-2020, international students accounted for 15.2% of the total enrollment in public universities. Well, this is really a huge jump. I recall very well in my classrooms in the 80s and 90s, I started teaching at the Nova University, Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities Musicology Department in 1982. And up to the 2000s, there was not one foreign student. According to the same report, the largest international student cohorts come from 4 Portuguese-speaking countries: Brazil, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, and Angola. I will now move to 2 examples with which I'm familiar, because, as I mentioned, I was a faculty member. I'm an emeritus professor of the Nova University of Lisbon, so I will use my own experience here to exemplify what I've been talking about. I will illustrate the development of the internationalization of Portuguese universities with examples of 2 of the 9 faculties and research institutes of the Nova University of Lisbon, the Portuguese academic institution with which I'm most familiar. I'm sure that there are similar stories in other universities, and I hope that we can all hear about them as well. So the Nova University of Lisbon is a public institution of higher education that was founded in 1973 as part of the government's plan to expand and diversify higher education in Portugal and to contribute to social and economic development of the country. Well, there were several other universities, also new universities founded at the same time, for example, Aveiro, Minho, Évora, and so forth. The Nova University adopted an innovative model within Portuguese academia at the time, favoring interdisciplinarity, new technologies, and new fields in Portuguese academia, such as communications, art history, and musicology. Since the 2000s, the Nova University of Lisbon set internationalization as one of its strategic priorities and has made significant progress in that direction. In the 1980s and 1990s, Nova had a negligible number of foreign students. In 2024, 20% of Nova's student body is international. Furthermore, the university has expanded its internationalization strategy overseas by launching a branch in Cairo, Egypt, that currently offers undergraduate degrees in environmental engineering and industrial engineering and management. Of all of Nova's 9 faculties and research institutes, and taking into account institutions of higher education throughout Portugal, I think I can safely say that Nova School of Business and Economics, Nova SBE, as it is known, provides the best example of a fully internationalized Portuguese institution of higher education. Founded in 1978, it began a vigorous internationalization program in the 2000s. a top institution of higher education. It received top international rankings by the Financial Times and is accredited by the most important accreditation agencies in business and finance. At Nova School of Business and Economics, courses at all levels are taught in English. In fact, English is SBE's lingua franca, which of course has facilitated internationalization. It makes full sense for a school of business. Of course, I'm not saying that all teaching should be in English in all Portuguese universities in all domains, of course not. But in this particular school, it makes full sense. The business world is certainly, the lingua franca is English. According to the data provided by Associate Dean Professor Catherine da Silveira, who I take this opportunity to thank publicly, 50% of the student body in all degree programs is international, and 51% of the faculty is also international. Nova SBE also promotes tens of exchange programs and agreements with business schools in other parts of Europe and the US, and offers several dual degree programs. It is an exemplary case, I think, in the panorama of Portugal's higher education institutions. As other schools within the same university and beyond, Nova's Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, founded in 1977, is rapidly internationalizing its student body. In 23-24, 18% of the total number of students is international, mostly coming from Europe and Portuguese-speaking countries. So is 27% of the research staff. However, only 6% of the faculty is international. And this map, I also would like to thank Dean Luis Batista, the Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, for providing the data that I'm showing you here. Is illustrative, and as you can see, the number of students coming from the US to study at Nova's Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities is really negligible, mostly coming from Africa and Europe. This map is online, and there is more information as well. In the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, there is, in fact, an increasing number of courses offered in English, catering to the increasing number of international students. Many courses are offered in both languages, and most courses, of course, are offered in Portuguese. In both schools of Nova University, most foreign students come from other Portuguese-speaking countries, and I think this is across the country as well, or from other countries in Europe. With the exception of the SIPN program offered at Nova's Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, the presence of American students is negligible, I would say. The same applies to faculty and researchers. For example, of the 94 faculty members at Nova School of Business and Economics, half of which are international, only 4 faculty members come from the US. It is safe to say that the situation is similar in other institutions of higher education throughout the country. Even though much progress has been made in internationalizing Portuguese higher education, there is much more to be done to transform what was and still is, in some institutions, an inbred system with an essentially national outlook into an open system that seeks to promote mobility, internationalization, and partnerships with other institutions beyond Europe, and to recruit the most talented students, competent faculty, and research staff internationally, while at the same time fostering diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability. In short, there's a clear need to expand and diversify internationalization, especially with respect to cooperation and the development of exchange programs with universities and research institutions in the US. A lot has been done, obviously, but there is much more to do, I think. What are the possible strategies for recruiting students, faculty, and research staff in the US, expanding US-Portugal student exchange programs and institutional partnerships? I now briefly turn to my own academic trajectory and professional experience, initially in the US and later in Portugal. Through this first-hand account, I share a personal historical perspective on Portuguese academia, at least in one of the fields of the humanities, and the internationalization strategies that I adopted, as I said, as a faculty member, essentially. So I completed my PhD in ethnomusicology at Columbia University in the city of New York in 1981. In case ethnomusicology is not a familiar term, and to most people it sounds very strange, and even to us professionals, and we debate this all of the time, you know, why do we have to keep ethnomusicology as our designation, the designation of our field, but time and again we go back to it. Anyhow, this is another debate. So in case you are not familiar, it is a transdisciplinary field of study that focuses on the cultural, social, political, and economic aspects of music, and more broadly, sound. Just think of fields like anthropology, sociology, and so forth. They are all visual. They all study what we see, and they neglect completely what we hear. And fortunately, also in all of these fields, sound is now entering as an important component to study human societies. Many universities in the US, Europe, Australia, and Japan, China, among other countries, offer graduate programs in this field. Columbia University offers one of the best programs in the US. Founded in 1754, it's a very old university, and when we think of, for example, the Nova, such a young university, it's a lot of food for thought. Columbia University is really a global research university with a diverse international faculty and student body, international partnerships and leadership in many fields. Apart from receiving a first-rate interdisciplinary training, during my 7 years of graduate study and my initial experience as a TA, a teaching assistant at Columbia University, I learned how to become a global citizen, to understand different worldviews, to dialogue and collaborate with colleagues and students with diverse backgrounds, identities, and goals, and to aspire towards making a difference on a global level. My training and experience at Columbia University were enhanced by the resources and rich cultural life of New York City, and by the experience of living in International House, a residence for graduate students and young professionals from around the world that was founded 100 years ago by David Rockefeller. It was a very, very strategic and thoughtful idea to invest his money in a part of his money in founding iHouse. At iHouse, as the institution is known to its residents and alumni, I had the opportunity of enhancing my understanding of different cultures, worldviews, and life ways, respecting difference and empathizing with others. I made friends with peers in different domains from various parts of the world. At iHouse, I also met my husband, who was then a graduate student in theoretical physics. My international experience at Columbia and at iHouse was life-changing and has anchored my academic career initially in the US and for over 4 decades in Portugal. In 1979, a year before I completed my PhD, at that time, ABDs, all but dissertation, could be hired as tenure-track assistant professor. That was my case. I was appointed as a tenure-track assistant professor at NYU, New York University's music department, an institution with a global vision that embraces its urban identity. One of my responsibilities was to establish the master's degree program in the emerging subfield of urban ethnomusicology. In fact, in the late 70s, NYU was promoting urban studies in several fields across campus, and it continues to offer courses and degree programs on urban topics. This challenge provided me with a valuable experience, not only of designing and running a solid academic program, but also of connecting academic work with the environment in which it is embedded. In this case, the rich and diverse music practices that thrive in New York City, which constituted the object of study for many of my students. For example, at that time, in the late 70s, early 80s, Washington Park was really a place to perform hip-hop, the beginning of hip-hop. And many of my students did projects, interviews, and so forth, and thesis on the hip-hop emerging scene as they observed it in Washington Park. It's an amazing laboratory. In fact, it still continues to be. I revisit very, very frequently, and I'm always intrigued by the musics that one can hear in different corners of this relatively small park, but extremely rich culturally. My career and life took a new turn when in 1982, my husband and I took up academic positions in Portugal. He as professor of physics at the Instituto Superior Técnico, and I as professor of ethnomusicology at Nova's Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, newly founded musicology department. Throughout my career in Portugal, I kept close ties with my field in American academia, having spent several semesters as visiting professor at Columbia, Princeton, Chicago, and Berkeley with the support of FLAD and of Fulbright and Gulbenkian, and I take this opportunity to thank all the, and of course FCT, the organizations that supported me, and continued being active in the main academic association in my field, the Society for Ethnomusicology, to which I was elected vice president in the mid-90s. These academic and personal ties with institutions, academic associations, and colleagues in the US and in other parts of the world were crucial for the internationalization strategy that I implemented through my leadership roles in both the musicology department and the Ethnomusicology Institute Center for Studies in Music and Dance that I founded at Nova's Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities in 1995. Like most Portuguese institutions of higher education at the time, Nova's Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities had a predominantly national profile and was primarily oriented towards teaching and teacher training, especially for secondary school. There were hardly any international students and very few international faculty members. I was one of two. Inbreeding was common practice, and a large percentage of the faculty consisted of the institution's graduate students. A limited number of students completed their graduate studies abroad, and those who did opted for European institutions, especially France and the United Kingdom. Like several other degree programs at Nova's Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, this was a pioneering program in Portugal, as well as in neighboring Spain. I joined the musicology department in the fall of 1982, as I said, and in 1983, I was appointed department chair for a 5-year term, and again for a 2-year term in 1995. This first term was, I'm not sure if it was a blessing or for a young academic, a huge challenge anyway. The first mandate coincided with the department's foundational phase, and the second with its expansion and gradual transformation, including the launching of an MA degree program, the establishment of the Erasmus exchange program across the faculty, the articulation of research and teaching, and the founding of the two FCT-funded research center, the Ethnomusicology Institute, Center for Studies in Music and Dance that I mentioned, and that I founded in 1995, and the Center for the Aesthetics and Sociology of Music, founded by my colleague Mário Vieira de Carvalho in 1997. I have to tell you that when I came to Nova, it was housed in what was a military barracks, there was one classroom. There were no offices, there was no library, and in that one classroom, sometimes we had raindrops. So it was very precarious. These developments represented a turning point. I'm talking about the phase of consolidation with all of the processes that I just mentioned, in the expansion and internationalization of the department, and in the training of a critical mass of researchers in different areas of specialization in musicology. In my 2 mandates as department chair, I set several goals in which internationalization was central. So, for example, to recruit competent faculty internationally, to consolidate the academic offerings according to international standards, and to integrate the department, importantly, in the international networks of musicological research. I encourage the best graduate students to carry out graduate study at top US universities and mentor their applications. 4 students, in fact, completed their PhDs at Columbia University, following my footsteps, 2 of whom are my colleagues at Nova's Musicology Department. I organized international scholarly meetings in Portugal, invited top international specialists as visiting professors for short periods of time, with the support of all the organizations I mentioned, and to publish their results. Oh, and I mentored advanced students to present papers in international conferences and to publish their results. While these and other internationalization measures are now commonplace, I mean, there's nothing special, really, in the 80s and 90s, they were exceptional. Furthermore, at that time, funding sources to support initiatives connecting Portuguese and US academia were limited essentially to Fulbright, Gulbenkian, and FLAD. I launched ethnomusicology in Portuguese academia in the 80s, initially through undergraduate courses and subsequently through MA and PhD programs, and founded the research institute that I mentioned earlier. Initially focusing on ethnomusicology, but later, as the name shows, expanding into a more comprehensive research unit in the area of music and dance studies. As president of the institute, I also adopted an internationalization strategy, encouraging researchers from outside Portugal to apply for postdoctoral grants and research contracts to carry out research at the institute. The third phase of the department's development began in 2000 and was marked by the consolidation of its undergraduate and MA degree programs and the launching of a formal PhD program, the implementation of the Bologna model, and the internationalization of the student body, the research staff at the 2 institutes. Today, Nova's Musicology Department and its 2 research units are fully integrated in international networks of excellence in musicological and ethnomusicological research. We are on the map. So now, drawing on my experience, I dare to suggest a few practical measures on possible strategies that can help expand internationalization between Portugal and US universities especially. Some of these measures are already being implemented and can be expanded, I think. Others might be possible to implement in the short or medium run. And my apologies if some of these measures are already in course or are happening already. My sources are basically websites. So first of all, of course, outreach and networking, all of us know how this is important in our own individual careers and for our institutions. But I think more can be done in terms of expanding outreach and networking in universities, research institutions, scholarly associations, and other organizations in the US, where little is known about the possibilities of studying and doing research in Portugal. In addition to information about academic offerings in this country, potential students and researchers could be made aware of the rich historical sources that are available in Portuguese archives. I'm speaking especially beyond, Portuguese studies programs. There is an awareness, of course. Archives, libraries, museums in many areas of knowledge, but especially in the domain of global history and culture, in which Portugal played a central role, as well as the histories of other territories that were colonized or that maintained close ties with Portugal. I'm aware, of course, of the ongoing outreach and networking efforts. I note that this year's conference of the American Portuguese Studies Association, held at Brown University, included a session entitled Global Strategies for Portuguese, a dialogue with funding agencies in Portugal, in which Michael Baum and Ricardo Pereira discussed FLAD's strategy for educational internationalization between Portugal and the US, and FLAD's education strategies and programs, and João Caixinha of the Camões Institute spoke about coordination for Portuguese language programs and education affairs in the US. I have attended some of APA's conferences and gave a paper once in a while, and I've never seen such a session. So really, this was an excellent idea and the right place, certainly. But I think that a similar strategy could be implemented in major international conferences in various domains hosted by Portuguese institutions, because there's a lot going on here in terms of international conferences, attracting students and scholars from many countries. These could be strategic locations for disseminating information about the possibilities of studying and doing research in Portugal, and about FLAD's and Fulbright's and Camões and other institutions' programs for supporting the circulation of students and scholars on both sides of the Atlantic. For example, as one of the organizers of the 46th World Conference of the International Council for Traditional Music, of which I was president for 12 years, actually, this is the largest global scholarly society in the field of music and dance research, that was hosted by the Institute of Ethnomusicology Center for Studies in Music and Dance at Nova's Campolide campus, attracting 800 delegates from 77 countries, including a large representation from the US. My colleagues and I would have welcomed the presence of FLAD at the conference, just as one example. Another measure is expanding short-term grants for graduate students and junior scholars. FLAD's short-term research fellowships at the Biblioteca Nacional de Portugal, Torre do Tombo, we already heard about it, and other archives and libraries. Fantastic that it's expanded to other archives and libraries across the country, has been a great success, and I have many colleagues who have been awarded this grant to their great benefit. This work has been reflected in books and articles that they published. It could be expanded to include museums and also exploratory field research. My field is anchored, actually draws a lot from anthropological methodology, and it's anchored on field research. So those of us who do field research could also benefit from exploratory, for example, field research, preparing for a project. This is a simple measure with great potential. It was implemented by Berkeley's Center for Portuguese Studies, that of course you know very well, that awarded a short-term grant to one of my graduate students when I was Gulbenkian visiting professor at UC Berkeley. He had done field research in Brazil and is fluent in Portuguese. His month's stay to carry out exploratory research in Portugal, encouraged by me, was crucial for his decision to apply for a postdoctoral contract at Nova's Ethnomusicology Institute within the framework of FCT's Scientific Employment Stimulus, a contract which he was granted. So for the past 3 years, he has been successfully doing research in Portugal on key topics such as music and migration, focusing on the Brazilian community in the Lisbon metropolitan area, and has greatly enhanced scientific dialogue with within the Institute and connections with academia in the US. So these short-term grants really work. I've experienced this. Another idea that comes to mind as an alumnus of a US university is forming an association of Portuguese alumni of US universities. I know that, of course, Fulbright has a lot of activity bringing Fulbright alumni together, but there are some of us. I didn't have a grant from Fulbright to do my PhD. I had a grant from Columbia University. So a fellowship, a doctoral fellowship. But there are many of us. My husband also had a doctoral fellowship from his US university, City University. So I think that such an association could be a very useful tool to bring us together, and we could all play an important role in building bridges between Portugal and USA higher education, and dialogue with FLAD, with Fulbright, and so forth, and work together. As far as I know, no such association exists. There is a Portuguese-American postgraduate society that is geared towards Portuguese and Portuguese-American graduates working in the US, and that's fantastic. But I think it would be good to have one here as well for those of us working here. The FLAD SIPN has been a highly successful program. I can attest to that. I taught a course on FADO in 2 editions with great pleasure. Quite a challenge to teach students who come from many different fields, and I made it clear that no need to, because everyone is very scared of not being able to read music notation, but it's not necessary. To learn a lot about FADO as a social, cultural phenomenon. Like other SIPN courses, in addition to classroom instruction, the course included direct contact with the FADO world through visits to museums, historical neighborhoods, cultural associations, and a live performance in a FADO house. And I gradually saw how students, in the beginning, they were kind of aloof and, oh, whatever, this is a strange music and all of that. And they became more and more engaged. It's fantastic to watch how this happens. I suggest expanding the SIPN program to graduate study, 1 semester here. It could be on the master's level, for example, creating the possibility for students from the US institutions to enroll for a semester in graduate programs in one of the partner universities. Supporting partnerships and joint degree programs between universities in Portugal and the US. Of course, this is a more involved project that will take time and needs grounding, but some of the previous suggestions could do this grounding, and certainly the work you have all done. So partnerships that could lead to joint degree programs on the MA and PhD levels between US and Portuguese universities could be considered. These programs could be hybrid, as was suggested this morning, while at the same time promoting faculty and student mobility, at least for 1 semester, I would say, among the participating institutions. A pilot project could be implemented in one of the programs of Portuguese studies, for example, to begin with, that are supported by FLAD in the US, and by Fulbright. This initiative could be expanded to other fields of study, especially those in which Portugal has rich resources to offer. And similarly, and maybe these 2 points could be joined, and I'm at the end of my talk. The idea of an association for alumni of US universities working in Portugal. Also, Fulbright and FLAD alumni. I know that Fulbright alumni are very active, and PhDs from the US are a huge asset, certainly, that can be mobilized to contribute to building bridges and consolidating and expanding extant partnerships between Portugal and USA higher education. I volunteer myself, all my experience to help with this. My contribution to the internationalization of Nova's musicology department and the Ethnomusicology Institute, Center for Studies in Music and Dance, is a case in point, whether trained in the US or have benefited from support for visiting professorships or short-term stays. Their first-hand experience of the alumni is valuable in establishing contacts and conceiving collaboration with their alma mater or with other institutions and scholarly societies in the US. To close, FLAD and Fulbright and other organizations and institutions have done a great deal to support the internationalization of higher education in Portugal and to build bridges between academic institutions in Portugal and the US. More can be done, of course, and I look forward to our discussion over the course of the day. Thank you for your attention.
Hello again, everybody. We're going to have a break now. It's a coffee break. We'll be back. We would like to be back at 11:15, if that is at all possible. in order to because of time. So if it is okay, we'll be back at 11:15. Thank you. Hello, please, we're going to start this session. We're going to resume. I would ask everybody to sit, please. Thank you.
Miguel, do I have to do any?
I don't think so. Yeah, they're good. You're good.
Is it-
We're on.
Tá a funcionar? Boa, ok. Bom dia outra vez. Então, we're going to get started right away here. And let me just introduce our first speaker, who's a dear friend and former head of the Fulbright Commission when I did my first Fulbright here in Portugal, so we go way back. Paulo Zagallo Melo is the Senior Internationalization Strategist at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University. He's also a bigwig at the Association for International Education Administrators. That's his official title, bigwig. But AIEA, which is sort of the premier organization for senior internationalization officers, both as a network and in some ways a lobbying organization for the interests of international education. I'm going to introduce Cheryl and Joel just before they speak, but Cheryl too, I think, was a former president of AIEA. Anyways, I'm going I could go on and on about Paulo and the fact that he also used to be here at FLAD, and we've kind of done this interesting sort of flip of our careers. But I think in the interest of time, I'll turn it over to each of you. I'll introduce each of you just before you speak, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you. Good morning. It's great to be back in my country, but also one of my former institutional homes here at FLAD. I'm going to talk about, this panel is on recruitment, enrollment, and that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. And I will focus mainly on what are the trends in terms of structure, in terms of strategy, and practice in international enrollment in the U.S., in the leading internationalization universities in the U.S. And then I'll try to apply that to the opportunities that I see from my perspective, and my perspective now is still the one of the U.S. International Office, my perspective, and how I see that Portuguese universities can continue building upon their successes in internationalization to get to maybe a different approach and an approach that I feel is more aligned with what's happening now and again, given the success only of Portuguese higher education internationalization. I'm just waiting for my presentation to come up at some point.
Maybe it's over here. There we go.
Okay, good. That gives me an excuse to. Yeah. So I moved from a career in the US as senior internationalization officer to a senior internationalization strategist, kind of a new position, which means that I'm still thinking about internationalization. I just don't have to manage the international office. And later on, I'll also talk a little bit about AIEA. I mean, all of you here are leaders in internationalization in Portugal, and I strongly recommend you getting more involved with AIEA. It's about leadership and strategy in internationalization. And being becoming president of AIEA, it's only because it's an association that gives you a lot if you get involved with it. It really gave me a lot for my career. And so later on, when people come up and tell you, could you give something back to AIEA and serve as board member or president, you kind of feel, yeah, there's no way I can get out of this one. And I'm sure, Cheryl, that happened to you as well. So I'll talk about global partnerships as drivers of internationalization, of international enrollment, and also mention particularly the case of Portugal. And the case of Portugal, obviously, is very interesting because of the legislation in Portugal that opens tuition to different levels of tuition to international students. I think that was a significant moment in terms of the potential that universities in Portugal have in terms of looking at enrollment in a slightly different way. So we'll start with the rationale of international enrollment. Every time I talk about international enrollment, I like to start here because I think we sometimes forget some of the reasons why it is important to have international students coming to our universities. And the main reason is because we're preparing students for the world. So we want to do that from a global education point of view. Now, of course, we cannot avoid acknowledging the importance of the economic and financial impact that international enrollment can have in institutions, but not only, and I'll show you how important it is, the impact beyond higher education institutions. And it helps improving the quality of education because you have a global classroom, because you're exposed to what other universities are doing, other higher education institutions and systems are doing. And that's why it's commonly said that international education is one of the fastest paced areas of higher education. And that the international office is known everywhere in the world. International offices are usually the ones that have to move faster within the university, and I see a lot of heads nodding. You've been there, done that, I know. The pressure is sometimes so much higher on you, on the international office for change because you're competing with the world and having to respond to their demands for change. And it helps with institutional reputation. Now it's the whole world that has heard about your institutions. And obviously, so I started with probably the most important one, and I close with another very important one. Soft power is very important. For instance, you live in another country, you study in another university in another country, you're not indifferent to that country. My two daughters just graduated from university this last academic year. One studied abroad in Australia. One studied abroad in Italy. You cannot criticize Italy or Australia respectively in front of them. I've learned that. So let's start with the economic impact, because it's usually, if you go to the US, it's one of the reasons why universities are looking at international enrollment. I worked in several states. I spent the last 7 years in Michigan at Western Michigan University, recently moved to Virginia Commonwealth University. But for instance, Michigan has a declining birth rate. Other states throughout the US have the same issue and has declining high school graduation rates. And sometimes high school graduation rates can be, that can be reversed a little more, a little faster with some policy. But demography doesn't respond as quickly. And so that becomes international enrollment or out-of-state enrollment and international enrollment included becomes more important because you need to keep looking at other sources of income, revenue, I mean. And so, for instance, for Virginia, you can see from the NAFSA reports that international students in Virginia contribute to the community, to the state, with over $600 million. And they support over 6,500 jobs. Now, these are in the community, beyond the universities themselves. And that's out of an enrollment in Virginia of about almost 18,000 students. And If you look just at my university, at VCU, the impact on the community is of about $40 million and almost 500 jobs, or over 400 jobs. So it's an economic impact that is significant, it's visible, and that goes to any university and any community where you have those that kind of international enrollment. So I'd love to start seeing these studies for Portugal. So if you can get your economists in your universities to start thinking about this and measuring this, that would be amazing, because this is so good for policy. You know, whenever I go and advocate for international education in general, for more resources at my university for international education, I open with this, just as a reminder. And then there's the financial impact, and there's the impact on the university itself. And for instance, VCU gets well over 40 million a year into revenue, university revenue, just from international students. So these are not, you know, these are numbers that are significant, and you might be thinking, well, but with our tuition in Portugal, that would be different. Yes, but my guess is that at the end of the day, the measure of the impact would probably be very similar. The numbers might not be the same, but the significance of the impact might be very similar. We talked about the rationale and how it's about delivering a better education and preparing students for the world. So I usually like to remind ourselves of how do international students see international enrollment? Why do they want to study abroad? Because in order to recruit internationally, you should know why, you know, what's the dialogue composed of when you're going to make your sales pitch and tell students anywhere in the world, come to my university. Well, the push factors from and this is from the international student's perspective, or the push factors are whether to go. Should I go and study, do a degree in another country? It's about human capital, it's about financial capital, and psychological capital. So it's about, obviously, becoming a stronger member of society and the workforce, of probably, you know, getting more income throughout your life after that experience, and obviously gaining self-confidence, optimism, hope, resilience. I mean, I always, when I used to deliver the opening remarks for international orientation when we welcome our international students. And for 12 years, I was the person in charge of that, first at Montana and then Western Michigan. And I'd always started by reminding our students, our international students, that you've got this. This is going to be so easy for you because you got here already. Nobody gave you this opportunity. These opportunities don't fall on your lap, you know, out of nowhere. It requires the courage to leave your country, leave your people, your families, your friends, your food, everything you hold dear, and go to another place where you don't know if you're going to succeed. You don't know how it is, how difficult it is. So the resilience, the self-confidence that requires should be able to then drive any international student throughout the degree after that. So I would always open by reminding them of that. So this is the mentality you're trying to recruit with or from. These are the people who are waiting for your university to tell them, come to my university. Then the pull factors, where to go. How do they choose where to go? Well, they are going to look at host country reputation. And you're in a very good position there because Portugal has a great reputation worldwide. It's one of those countries where you really don't have to make a very strong case and kind of, hide the not so good parts from the students and, like we have to do in the US sometimes. And so they look at cultural, touristic, technological, economic, academic, climate, security, safety, all those things, all those types of reputation are important. And then they look at the academic institution. But if they're not convinced with the country, they might not even look at the academic institution. So the first part for you, I think it's really easy. Then academic institution reputation, they look at rankings, and you might like or not like rankings, doesn't matter. A parent in country X or a student in country X, they have to have some measure of comparison. And they're going to go with rankings because that's the readily available measure of comparison. So it doesn't matter if you like the rules of the game, you're in the game. You might as well play it. And there I see that, the trend has been really good for most Portuguese universities. You're coming up in the rankings, in several types of rankings, and that's good. And then the degree programs label marketability. That's really important. It's so much easier nowadays to sell a program in video game or gaming than it is to sell a program in computer science. Now, you might have the department chair of computer science in my universities, for instance, saying, but we have those programs. We teach those things. Yeah, but you go ahead and package it as gaming or as computer science, and the students are going to look at it in different, you have to go with the world. So the label of the program, regardless of the content being the same, the label of the program is becoming more important. Facilities, resources, easy admissions, do you have pathways for language and so forth? That's all important. Campus employment opportunities, do you hire international students to work at your universities while they're there? Well, if you do, let them know right away in the first 30 seconds of your conversation. And then the boundary factors, higher education barriers in the home country. Some countries have good higher education institutions, but they just don't have enough. And the growth for the college-age population is so fast that there's no way, and resources sometimes, that they're going to build universities for so many students. So they're at capacity. The students will have to go out of their country. At that point, doesn't matter how good their higher education is. It's at capacity, and they're going to go to leave. It's one of the things that we usually forget. That's not only because they want another experience. Sometimes they can't have the experience in their own country. They have to leave. So other boundary factors, visas, immigration, citizenship law in the host country, in this case in Portugal, social resources, migrant communities, family, do they have other communities similar to theirs here, financial reserves, etc. And you'll have this, I think, the presentations later on available to you.
That's right. We probably should have had Seth here, the whole panel on visas.
Yeah.
I know many of us
So,
feel the pain.
yeah. So how do you manage then, and what's the practice for international enrollment from a US university's perspective? Well, these are the components you look at. You start with recruitment, and that's basically, and I'll look at this later, but you start the recruitment, then this is kind of the cycle, very briefly. This is a cycle for international enrollment. Recruitment, admissions, immigration services, student success. So it's support the students. That's enrollment too. Enrollment is not recruiting the students and getting them to go through the door. Enrollment is keeping the students there and keeping the students successful, because that also has an economic impact and financial impact. And obviously another component are the international partnerships. And that's most of what I do now at VCU. Then you have the intensive language programs that students might need. And then you have marketing and communications kind of encompassing all those areas. This is all these areas should be considered in international enrollment. So the cycle, a little more in detail, recruitment is only about one thing. It's generating applications. That's the role of a recruiter. They want to generate applications. I'm going to give you the sales pitch so that I want you to apply to my university. And that's done. That's the end of recruitment as a function is to generate the application. Then, and this is a common gap, is the second step. Common gap even in the US, even in the universities I worked for, this is a common gap. It's the recruitment and admissions part. It's the advising. It's getting the students who applied to actually being admitted and register. So the being admitted, the admissions part is usually more easily delivered. It's the working on we call the yield between being admitted and actually showing up. That is usually a gap. Most commonly a gap in US universities, and where I've done a lot of work in the international offices I worked for with my teams because we all knew that was a gap we had. And then after registration, after you have the students there, enrollment is definitely not done because then you need to keep the students engaged. If they're not engaged, they'll leave. If they're not engaged, they will not succeed. They will drop out. They'll go back to their country or do something else. Student success is one of the most important and maybe one of the most overlooked parts of enrollment, and maybe because of that, one of the most recent components of enrollment in terms of practice and policy and strategy in universities. Keep your students there, because if they don't graduate, if they don't go beyond the first or second year, you're recruiting students and you're losing them. So any impact you're trying to cause, it's not going to last that long. And this is what we have always to keep in mind in international enrollment. It's all about a human being hoping for an enriching life experience leading to a better life. This is what the students want when you first talk to them, and when they graduate, until they graduate from your university. This is what's on your mind. This is what you cannot keep track of, what you cannot stop keeping track of. You have to keep this in your mind at all times. So these are I want to be mindful of time, so I'm not going to go over them one at a time, but these are the top resources that US universities use to recruit international students. And when I am presenting on this and I ask the audience, so what do you think is the most used resource by US universities? I usually hear international partnerships, I hear agents. Most commonly, I hear in-person recruitment events. It's not. It's really using your current international students. This is so more important now with this generation. This generation doesn't care if I have a fancy title from a well-known university, and I'm telling them, you should come and study at my university. If I grab one of our international students at VCU and have them tell them, why they should come to the university where they are studying as an international student, they'll get the job done in 30 seconds. I could be there talking to them for half an hour. They don't care if, I've been in international education for 30 years and I'm senior internationalization strategist. Doesn't matter. Now let's go over the models for recruitment and admission. I've worked and seen several of these models. This is how you usually see the structure for handling recruitment and admission, international recruitment, of course, and international admissions. So on that side, we have an admissions office and an enrollment management area, and they work on recruitment and admissions for the whole university. They recruit US students from the state to come to the state, US students from out of state to come to the state, and all students from the world to come to the university. It's usually vice president for enrollment management, reporting to either the president of the university or the provost. On the other side, we have an international office, which might have an international, or has in this case, an international admissions unit, or also commonly called International Student and Scholar Services. Typically a senior international officer reporting to the provost. This is one model where you have the admissions office that recruits US students, also recruiting international students, and also admitting them. They do everything. There's no separation there for recruiting and admitting international students. This is typically, and these are my observations, I have no evidence to show you this, other than my observations during my career. This works fairly well in very large universities with very large very large admissions offices or enrollment management areas, because then they can assign a team just to handle international within the enrollment management office. It doesn't work as well in smaller universities, because then you're tasking someone who also does domestic recruitment with international recruitment. And then that becomes something that, your international enrollment might be 10% of your total enrollment, 15%, which is already great in the US. And the person who has to do two things is going to go with the 85% or the 90% of enrollment first. So it works well in larger universities, not as well in smaller universities. The other model is the international office does both things, recruitment and admissions. And I worked with this model in one university. I moved that model into the international office handling everything. When I arrived was enrollment management. In my last university, I actually already had this model in place. So my office at my last university handled everything, handled international recruitment, international admissions. You have the expertise. It's a great model because all the expertise is handling where, the goal is aligned with where the expertise is, the practice is where the expertise is, so that's great. You have to have the resources. Not always you have a budget model there that is kicking the revenue back to the international office with all the students that the international office is bringing. So you need to have that budget strategy side of things that also is rewarding the international office with for the impact, the economic impact or financial impact that's bringing to the university. So here, for this model, the strategic budgeting model is very important too. And then you have, and this is where, so VCU, this is the model we have at VCU. The international office handles international recruitment, but the admissions office, the general admissions office handles international admissions. So it's kind of a division of labor there. These are the three models you've seen. I've not seen other models that stray away too much from this. But if you have, let me know, because I love studying these things. And another part of the model that I feel it's really interesting is the international recruitment part. You have the model where the recruiter is also the admissions counselor. They travel, they generate the applications, they review the applications, they admit the student, they issue the I-20, they do everything. Sometimes they're traveling and then they come back and the student they talk to has applied, immediately they go in and kind of take care of the application. The other model is the recruiter and the admissions counselor. They're different people. Some people recruit, they're They're the boots on the ground all over the world generating applications, and then you have the admissions counselors who are processing the applications and turning them into admissions. Most commonly, I've seen the model on the left. The recruiter is also the admissions counselor. My preferred model is a mix of both. You have dedicated recruiters. They only recruit. You have at least a couple of dedicated recruiters. And then you have also admissions counselors who might do a trip or two also when we're out of capacity for the recruiters. You send the admissions counselors too. But the most efficient is when you're generating applications and that you're not waiting for that person to go back to their other job and admit the applications. Overall recruitment strategies, I'm not going to go very long over these. So, the typical intensive language programs, pathway programs, partnership, again, US universities, partnerships with community colleges, high schools. These are more things that you can do at home. And then the international recruitment strategies, short-term programs, bring students for a week. And then hopefully they want to come and do the full degree at your university. Curricular articulations, my preferred type of work. Sponsored student programs, international high schools, etc. I mean, all these things. And all of this, so I work on all of this, but through partnership development. So this is really how I see that everything can be done better in international enrollment is if you do all these things through partnerships, through international partnerships. And that's the work I do currently at VCU.
Not everybody may be familiar with the
Pathway program?
If you could just maybe say a couple words about what that is.
Sure, and I think I actually have something later on it. And so what are the outcomes of the work of doing institutional partnership development for that type of work? Well, the outcomes are to leave a curricular, you can leave a curricular infrastructure. I developed, for instance, when I was at Western Michigan University, I developed 3 dual degrees with Instituições Superior Técnico from the University of Lisbon. I left Western, the dual degrees. I'm going to stay there, I hope, for many years to come. It's a curricular pipeline that stays. I like to leave structure. I like projects that create structure. And it's not a building, but it's building curriculum that lasts. And so just in the my last month at Western Michigan, I attended commencement and I saw one of the dual degree students graduating from Western Michigan with a master's in aerospace engineering. So curricular infrastructure. Another outcome is shared motivation. You're motivated with the program you developed, and guess what? The partner university is also motivated, and they're trying to do, they're both trying to make it work because there's a shared responsibility. They both wanted this partnership to happen. They both feel responsible for it. They both want to make it work. And it's the multiplying effect of partnerships. Now, for instance, the partnerships also I created with, when I was at Western Michigan University, at some of them, then we had some of our Portuguese partner universities applying to EU funds to generate more program and more students for our partnerships. There's multiplying effects. And sorry, I don't want to skip this one because for me this is one of the most important. It's the channel of trust that partnerships create. And this is has been particularly important in the US. So first, when the Trump administration implemented the international student ban and some of the rhetoric on some international populations not being as welcome in the US. And then with the pandemic, and for instance, with any type of issues in the US, gun control issues, there's a strong perception of, all these things create the perception of, don't go to the US. But if you have a partnership, your partner university in the country, and that happened with Western, we had our partner university saying, hey, we've been sending students from Malaysia for decades to Western Michigan University. We know Kalamazoo. Our students keep going there and coming back and telling us it's an amazing experience. You can go. And that's when you have someone waving your flag for you, which is really the best thing you can have, other than you having to explain yourself, is when other people just tell you, this is great, you can go. We have students, Korean students have gone to Kalamazoo for such a long time, or Indonesian students, and we had our partner universities there sustaining enrollment while there were many levels of negative perception to going to the US to study. So that channel of trust is probably my favorite outcome in terms of partnerships. So some strategies, those were the outcomes. These are strategies and tactics. Curricular articulations, as I mentioned, dual degrees. I think it's time for Portuguese universities to move, not abandon, move beyond focusing on mobility and exchanges and going really into dual degrees, curricular articulation and developing those partner universities that create that. And I know some of you are doing it because some of you have done it with my universities. But I think as a strategy, I'd like to see more Portuguese universities leading that process rather than, having universities from other places in the world asking you if you want to develop a partnership. I want you to be the leaders of that conversation and seek your partnerships, the partnerships that make sense for you. Because you're ready, because I've been working with so many of you. I look around the room and I see familiar faces everywhere. You're as ready as any international office I've worked with in the US. Country liaisons, recruitment agents. So country liaisons is something that was a terminology that didn't exist. I just turned recruitment agents as I used to tell my team, let's put our best recruitment agents on steroids and call them country liaisons. So for the good markets, for the very best recruitment agents, we just turned them into country liaisons. We gave them university emails, university business cards, you authorized to represent the university, and they became obviously more motivated and engaged with working with us. And I'm sure there are other strategies and tactics that you have worked with and that I'm not familiar with. And focus on relationships and on partnerships and on partnership outcomes. What do you want to see out of the partnership? And don't forget that it's a relationship. You go in, you sign a document, you don't communicate with your partner for more than 6 months, or you only communicate with them once a year. Well, that's not going to create a very good relationship. It's a relationship. I remember I took my president at Western Michigan on several trips, and he would come back and it seemed like you know all these people, like you're friends with all these people, so you're their family. You're not. It doesn't look like a formal meeting. So, yeah, because you go there and you start just engaging with these people, and then you get to know them and you become friends. And yeah, by now I've been there 3-4 times and we're friends. Yeah, of course. And those are the relationships you want to build. And then build on your relationships with community relationships, institutional, personal, look for the common ground. You know, this is also about recruitment agents and how to turn them into country liaisons. I'm not going to go over it. You can see it later on at the presentation. I know we're running a little bit behind, so I'm not. But I'll focus on Portugal. These are on the left of the countries with the largest number of international students. You know, your typical, your usual suspects. Then on the right, the estimated number of students from these countries who have studied abroad, so the sending countries. Look at the sending countries, look at the host countries, and look for things that are happening. For instance, Canada is the third largest receiving country. But there are opportunities with Canada. Canada has just capped the number of international students, which is now over 500,000. They have put a cap on to get that number down to 360,000. So over the next year or so, Canada won't have about 150,000 students, international students a year. That's an opportunity for everyone else on the game. Where are the students? Where are students? Students who go to Canada are usually coming from where? Because they're not going to go there. You should see who are the best sending countries to Canada. I'm definitely looking at that. You should do too. Where are the best sending countries to Canada? Because there are going to be opportunities for you to recruit those students. And US and China relations. There's a lot of pressure on several states in the US not to have any partnerships with China of any type. Well, those are opportunities, you know, for instance, if we think of the state of Florida, where there's been a lot of pressure for universities not to develop partnerships with China. Well, where are the students coming from in China? You know, the Canada intake cap. Look at new sending countries. Uzbekistan is a new sending country. Pack your bags and go there.
Yeah. Exactly.
So this is the kind of thing that you should look at when you're thinking of international enrollment. Also, the case of Portugal, diaspora recruitment, and diaspora is about people. Diaspora is where you know, Portuguese are. Portuguese are all over the world. They're not only, you know, it's not only about the culture and the language, it's about the people. Where are our people? They're everywhere. Well, connect with them. They can recruit for you through partnerships or not. I mean, they will know you. They will know the country. You don't have to make a case. And obviously, bridge intensive programs. Those are the pathway programs. So, and those are programs where instead of, so let's say there's a student with a lower proficiency on Portuguese language. They would not be ready immediately to get enough of a score to go directly into a program. But instead of bringing them to just learn language and then getting them into the academic program after they get to that level, you start doing both from the beginning. And there's research. Here I can present evidence. There's research that shows that if they start the academic part right away alongside the language part, that generates kind of a synergy in terms of how their language proficiency accelerates. So it's great to develop those programs where instead of, let's say, a student, instead of having 4 courses, 4 academic courses, starts with 1 course and the rest just language, or 2 courses, 2 academic courses, and the rest just intensive language. That's a very good practice, and there's evidence that shows that that's, you know, that bridge or pathway program is the best way. And gaps impacting partnership drivers. Well, resources always to jumpstart. Think of this as jumpstarting the investment that will generate resources. That's how you have to sell it in your university. We need this money to work on partnership development for enrollment. But if you give us this, in 3 years, we'll give you twice as much, or 3 times as much, or 5 times as much. Just give us this to start, and we'll commit. In 3 years, I'll give you 3 times your money. And always keep in mind the rationale we started with. And those little dinosaurs are my LinkedIn on the top left, and AIEA's contact on the conference link on the bottom right. And it's always a pleasure to be here, and thank you for giving your attention for these few minutes. Thank you.
That was excellent, Paul. So let me introduce Cheryl. Cheryl Matherly is Vice President and Vice Provost for International Affairs at Lehigh University in my home state of Pennsylvania. She's also a former president of AIEA. And she is somebody who I quickly, as I got more and more involved in the internationalization networks, I realized is a true mover and shaker in this group of professionals. And I'm just so happy. SIPN has recently signed an agreement with Lehigh, and they're going to be sending more of their students.
We've got 5 students waiting for approval or waiting to be accepted.
We're super happy about that. But anyhow, I know we're short on time, and so I won't go on and on about Cheryl. Thank you for being here.
All right, thank you. So, and I'm really pleased to be here and appreciate very much the invitation. So, where I'm going to be following very much in the line of what Paulo talked about, beginning with looking more in terms of the partnership and recruitment pieces, I want to talk a little bit about trends with study abroad. And it seems particularly appropriate as we're going to be celebrating 10th anniversary of SIPN. And we'll be looking at this through the lens of study abroad post-COVID and some of the patterns and returns. And look at it particularly through opportunities here in Portugal with that. But I'm going to ask for just a very, very, very brief indulgence to let me introduce something about Lehigh, because I think it's helpful to understand something about the institution I'm coming from, because it certainly informs how I'm thinking about work with study abroad. So Lehigh University in Michael's home state of Pennsylvania is a private university up in sort of northeast Pennsylvania. So just to give you just the quick geography centering, we're about an hour from Philadelphia, about an hour and a half from New York City. So that sort of positions it in an area called the Lehigh Valley. And that we're located in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and that. Lehigh was founded in 1865. If you know anything about U.S. history, that's right in the middle of the U.S. Civil War. It was founded by a wealthy industrialist with this vision that it would create educate classically trained engineers who would be part of rebuilding the United States after the war. And so our earliest programs were very much in engineering, bridge building, mining technologies, all of those kinds of things. And as a matter of fact, international then was a big part of who we were right from the beginning. We enrolled our first international students 3 years after the founding of the university. They happened to come from another Portuguese-speaking country. They came from Brazil, and it was all part of that period of kind of building things of that, and that's very much still who we are. But now we are a comprehensive university with 5 colleges, arts and sciences, business, education, relatively new College of Health, and then, of course, our engineering and applied sciences program. We're considered a medium-sized university, so about 7,500 students, and that gives you some sense of sort of the size and the university there by numbers. We are in we're consistently ranked by U.S. News World Report among the top 50 universities, but this is the one that right now I think we're most proud of. This ranked by Wall Street Journal is the 15th best, because that's about outcomes. And so the university takes very seriously what we do in terms of our success on helping students get jobs. And so it's that return on investment and how that measures. And that certainly plays into some of how we think about the abroad programs. Quickly on our international front, because again, this will certainly play into some of my remarks, about 42% of our students have some kind of an international experience before they graduate. We're very proud of it. That's a high number, we know that. And that's both students who are doing traditional study abroad experiences as well as other kinds of experiences that I'll talk a bit about, internships and other such. We have a little over 1,000 international students at the university, and about 1 in 3 of our faculty have some kind of a degree from abroad, so very international. And my last couple comments then, again, just to frame this, is that this is also then reflected in our new university strategic plan, Inspiring the Future Makers. And the strategic plan, global, has a very much a through line in what we're doing. But our new university strategic plan is focused on the new intellectual frontiers, the new scholarship frontiers that we'll be engaging, and so that's the Make It New. We're looking at things that have that impact. How do we work to where our work, our scholarship, our teaching have impact in the places we work? And how do we think about this in terms of partnerships? And that last is really quite interesting because that's really the global piece, but it's also global local in that. So how do we think about ourselves as a partner, both within the Lehigh Valley and impact in the state of Pennsylvania? But it's also how that has an impact, how we think of ourselves as a partner in terms of who we work with globally. And we really look at that in terms of this idea of driving towards solutions that have societal change, and we do that through this commitment to experiential learning. So that's a bit about who we are, who Lehigh is in this, and as I said, that very much informs my thinking about how we do education abroad. But I think it also sort of gives, again, a little context for a not atypical U.S. university in this. So let me turn attention now to study abroad and looking at study abroad post-COVID for this. So I want to start with just a report from the American Council on Education that every 5 years does something called the Mapping Internationalization Report. And this is looking at internationalization at U.S. universities, sort of gives an idea of what's important, what are trends, things of that sort. And the last report issued in 2022 was actually compiled during COVID, which was kind of interesting because it certainly affected some of the data and some of the reports about what U.S. institutions were doing. But when asking you as U.S. institutions, what were the priorities? Why were they internationalizing? In 2020, so this is like right before the start of the pandemic, the top 2 reasons that the U.S. universities were internationalizing was to recruit international students and then to increase the number of U.S. students studying abroad on that. And those were almost, if you looked at it in terms of the response, they were almost equal in terms of percentage of why of importance to the U.S. institutions. And then you look at the other things they say underneath that is to develop partnerships with institutions abroad, internationalize the curriculum and co-curriculum, and faculty development. And I would argue that actually those last 3 are actually very tied to that same commitment on study abroad and growing the number of students there that study abroad. And those same motivations are actually very much the same reasons that Paulo was talking about. You bring international students, about global perspective, diversity in the classroom, all those same reasons are certainly there impacting that in terms of study abroad. And so leading up to COVID, so this data comes from the Institute for International Education and their annual Open Doors reporting. And this is from November of last year. Study abroad data reporting always lags by about 1 year. So this looks at data up through the 21-22 academic year. So what's obvious in this is that you see leading up to COVID, the numbers of U.S. students who were going abroad was on a very steady and a pretty regular increase in that. And that reflected a number of things. It reflected that prioritization of the U.S. Universities. It reflected investment from different scholarship programs on the part of the government, from the federal government, and programs there. It reflected partnership activities such as the SIPN partnership. It was a lot of things that were really reflecting that particular sort of steady growth, that steady state of growth. Obviously, we're looking at then, the COVID impact, which largely suspended those activities. But what I want to point out is that last jump there. And what you see is a pretty sharp rebound then in those numbers of those students who are starting to go abroad as soon as institutions were back in a position to be able to introduce that. So if you're just looking at that peak number there, the right before COVID, we were at about 347,000 U.S. students that were going abroad, highest numbers in history to that. But you're beginning to see that pretty rapid, that pretty fast spike back up, and that's what we're really all paying attention to because that's where the excitement is around that. So this also gives you an idea of where U.S. students go abroad, and that. The big three have remained the big three for a long time. UK, Spain, Italy really driving a lot of those study abroad numbers. But I want to point out that since COVID, since this rebound, 73% of students who go abroad are going to Europe on that. So it remains an extremely popular destination. But I think there's also a number of other reasons for that. Some of it is, I think, that a lot of the European study abroad destinations opened up more rapidly than some of the other places. I think there was a sense of some of these partnerships that U.S. universities had with their European partners. There was a sense of trust and confidence in the ability to reopen programs on that. So it reflects, I think, a number of things as well on that. But certainly gives you sort of a sense, sort of a disproportionate sense of importance of Europe for U.S. study abroad programs. And this is also interesting then. This gives you a picture of what the profile, what are the programs that are going abroad from that. So the largest number are business and management programs and social sciences and so on to that. But one of the things that I also want to point out, again, as a significant COVID impact on this, prior to COVID, there had been a tremendous focus on increasing the number of students from STEM fields and going abroad. And so in 2018-19, the last year where we have full pre-COVID data, about 26% of the students who went abroad were in some kind of a STEM field. And so one of the big impacts, and I think one that we're going to see with sort of longer term consequences to that, is that if you look at what those numbers are now, so 26% before COVID were students in STEM field, engineering and science fields, which again reflects a big investment on the part of U.S. institutions to really develop programs for that population. Now you look at this, post-COVID, if you take the physical and life science and engineering, that's about 14%. So that's a big rollback. That's a loss, and I think is going to be one of those areas of opportunity because I think institutions are, speaking from my own institution, looking at how then we begin to bring back those programs and find ways to kind of grow those numbers back again. So what's different post-COVID? So we see Western Europe has rebounded in a very big way, and expect that will probably continue. One of the things we're also seeing is that for many U.S. institutions, our recruitment pipelines for study abroad programs were disrupted. We lost some of those, it's those voice of the students, just in the same way that you see with recruiting international students to your campus. Same thing with our study abroad programs, and that 2-year period really disrupted a lot of those kind of networks and pipelines of that. And so finding new ways and other ways to be able to kind of promote the programs on that. We're seeing that a lot of our students simply need more support as they come into the study abroad experiences on this. And I think there's a number of factors when we get to discussion. We'd be very interested to talk a little bit more about what we're seeing. But students who have come out of the remote learning out of high school into university, that kind of just adjustments, we're still seeing some of that lingering effect of just students needing more support and more time as they prepare for some of these kind of experiences. And I think it's not unconnected to the mental health and wellness on that. And I'll just end with saying, too, that a lot of institutions, and for all this reason, as they're looking to come out of this and rebuild their programs, are really looking at partners that the capacity of the partners to be sort of full supporters of all these needs and diverse kind of ways of diverse needs of our students for going abroad. But what is still the same? the same, there are many things that I think have not changed. One, just this commitment to expanding the avenues of study abroad for those who have not historically participated, new destinations, all the values that we ordinarily have with doing study abroad, of connecting it around program areas and all of this. All those have remained the same, and especially then that last part of looking at partners who can then do this in a way that's safe, trusted, and really high-quality manners there around that. And as I said, what we're seeing on our own campus are very much consistent with this trends. The bounce back post-COVID was fast, and for about a year, we thought it was just the post-COVID bounce. But we're now into starting our third year of our highest number of just continued growth, and we're seeing the highest number of students participating in study abroad in our history, and so exceeding those numbers sort of pre-COVID, and actually did a really nice piece about some of those trends and factors on that. But what about the models, and are those models staying the same in that? Paulo talked a little bit about the motivations of international students who go abroad. And I always start with this because it's different than US students going abroad and that. And so all those push-pull factors there that Paulo talked about, drive students who go out and go to do their full degrees. But US students are a little different in that. Motivations are, a desire to travel, see the world. They're very concerned about cost and making this to be affordable. Oftentimes, family and heritage ties are factors. Institutional arrangements, so those kind of cooperation and partnerships become really important. And at the end of the day, that ROI. Is there something that's going to help me in terms of, if I do this, help me with getting a job to justify the time, the expense to do something like that? And so those really kind of underscore a number of the things there. This impacts a lot of what we see. So in terms of program types, U.S. students, you're probably already well aware of this because you're probably experiencing this with work with U.S. institutions. The preference, the strong drive is around short programs, and shorter as in summer and short semester programs. And a lot of that has to do with just the cost, the ability to fit that into different degree programs, not to delay time to graduation, which is a major issue on that. So there's a number of really good reasons for that. And I think that we should anticipate that is going to be a trend that will accelerate and not shorten, become less. But we're also seeing a trend towards more students doing non-credit or other kinds of experiential opportunities. And so IIE has been tracking this data about non-credit experiences. I will tell you, I think that is a vastly underreported number. And it's partly because this 12,690 number that are counted out of the 188,000 students, these are ones that are affiliated or sponsored enough by the institution that they would be tracking those experiences. And one of the things we know about a lot of these non-credit experiences is that sometimes they're done where students are making those arrangements independently. They're working with organizations on their own on that. And so I would argue that is a vastly underreported number, and that we're actually seeing far more students seeking these other alternative kinds of ways to have these same kind of learning experiences. And so all of that then, I would think then, are impacting the kinds of trends, the types of programs there that we're seeing on that. So some of the trends that I'm seeing that I think are useful to introduce is, first of all, this rise in first-year programs, and many more institutions that are now adding what essentially is a study abroad experience as the first year, the first experience into the university before they even get to campus and that. We're doing that, we're in our third year of this, we're doing this in Latin America. And this is a group of our students who are doing what we call Lehigh Launch, which is a fall semester, first year fall semester program in Santiago, Chile, and that. And there's many reasons that institutions are doing this. Some of it is an enrollment management strategy. Others are doing it because, and I think this is really where the trend is going more, this is our motivation around this, is that it's understanding the impact of study abroad as as we term a high impact learning experience, something that is so impactful on the rest of the student's academic journey and success, affecting everything from student academic retention, academic success, academic performance, and that. And we look at it in terms of those impacts that many institutions are looking at how do we kind of bring that kind of an experience in for students as early as possible and help that then to shape the rest of their time of what they're doing there at university on that. And so this is an interesting trend. It's a very different group of students that choose to do this. I will tell you, from what I see with our students who are doing it, they're kind of an adventuresome, intrepid soul that says that they would be willing to start their Lehigh academic career in Santiago, Chile, before they even get to campus on that. But you're seeing a number of institutions do this, and it's interesting as we begin to track the impact of that on those students when they get to campus. Many become study abroad repeaters, which also isn't terribly surprising there with that. A second thing that we're seeing, I already talked about about short programs, but I'm going to say those short programs that require a longer-term engagement. And these are programs that are trend towards these experiences where it may be the time in country, the time that the students are actually traveling, may be a 2-week or 3-week kind of experience, but it's embedded as part of a much longer kind of experience that allows for deeper cultural engagement, longer engagement with a particular partner, just a different kind of engagement on the place here. And what I'm showing here as a slide is an example that that we call our Global Social Impact Fellowship. That is a program that we do in Kazakhstan. And my colleague over there on the right and there is the person who has developed these. This is a program that we're doing with Almaty University, among others, but Almaty has been sort of a key partner on this. That are students who are working alongside their Kazakh counterparts on these projects that are focused on environmental systems, developing kind of educational programs for students about environmental, social problems and such, and it's sort of a number of engagement areas on that. These students, our Lehigh students, are involved in this project for an entire year, but they spend 2 weeks in Almaty in May of each year. And so while the time in country is very short, the engagement with our Kazakh partners is really long and sustained on this. And it has a certain impact of a benefit of quality of the educational experience, but for our students, certainly lowering the cost, lowering the time that they need to be there to country, but I don't think it's lowering the quality of the impact or the quality of the experience or the cultural engagement that they're having with this. A third thing that we're seeing is what I'm calling sort of the next generation of virtual exchange in COIL, and I appreciated COIL mentioned there early to this. COIL certainly predated collaborative online international learning, certainly predated COVID, had a big jump during COVID on that. And during COVID, many of us were turning to COIL and virtual exchanges as ways to keep a number of our programs going on that. Coming out of this, though, I think we're seeing a sort of next iteration and next generation of what this looks like. That these virtual exchange and COIL less being seen as a substitute, I can't go abroad, therefore I do it, to now being seen as a complement to this. So how does it extend that particular experience on that? And I've got sort of a number of things up here as ways that's happening, but I'll just mention on the right is one of our programs called the Global Village, which is a summer intensive. It had been a 5-week immersive experience of bringing students from around the globe to the Lehigh campus for a global leadership program on that. We are continuing that, but we're actually we're shortening the period in time in residence on campus, but complementing that with both virtual work happening before and after to lengthen the time that the students are engaged around the learning on this. but reducing the time that they need to actually be physically present to that. And I think we're seeing more of these ways of where the virtual is complementing to extend the kind of engagement around that, not being presented as the alternative to doing these abroad kind of ways. And then the last, I would say, of the trends is this internship and undergraduate research opportunities. And this is a group of our students who do something through our Iacocca International Internship Program, which is a funded student internship program. And it comes back to that issue of ROI, looking for something that is sort of a professional experience, something can go on their resume about that. I'll also point out undergraduate research opportunities, huge opportunity for U.S. students looking to work in research labs with partner universities to get that kind of international experience. And all of it comes back to looking to something that can be on a resume that helps with, again, sort of justifying expense and time away to do this, helps with graduate school applications. All of this are areas there. And I'll mention that just especially that research opportunity, speaking again from our perspective, we're really looking at a lot of our partners for adding and helping us with kind of developing more of those opportunities. And we're doing it also in a reciprocal way as well for our partners on that. So as we look at this then in terms of implications for Portugal, this is the numbers that you have U.S. students coming for the U.S. students studying abroad in Portugal. And I'll point out that if you look at the bounce, the post-COVID bounce, it's back almost up to the numbers, the pre-COVID numbers on that. And so clearly the trends are there, and which is encouraging, I think, as we look at this. And I'd say then, so what I see then as implications in looking at how to recruit more U.S. students to come and participate, study abroad, advance more of the SIP goals in this. I think one is seeing this, that Portugal's following the trends, and I might even say even exceeding those trends there of seeing the bounce back there with study abroad, and certainly the interest in Europe creates that kind of opportunities. To anticipate that this growth of short-term programs is going to continue. And so, and seeing that as then what are ways then to continue to make that, to help that add more value to that, and not seeing it just as short-term tourism, but really looking at this as a new educational model and creating new value on how to do that. I think you can anticipate there's going to be an emphasis on STEM programs, and I think there's a huge opportunity here around that. But U.S. universities, it was a long, steady commitment to grow that participation pre-COVID, and I think we're going to see with that a big impact, a big push to try to regain that ground as we grow students back for that. Flexibility will remain important. Certainly, the kind of resources for health, especially mental health, will be important. And then the last I'd say is just anything that then is around that career readiness, helping students, again, really answer that question, that ROI question on that. And I think we'll hear more about some models even this afternoon that are interesting ways about how that happens for different populations of students. And so with that, I will end on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. Well, last but not least, I have certainly the person who has the longest history personally with me. So I don't think, most of you haven't heard this story, but Mr. Joel Eriksson is the whole reason that I ended up coming to Portugal. And we haven't seen each other for 36 years. So, well, we've seen each other on Zoom, but we haven't actually been together. So he and I were at the University of Toronto, where I did my master's work. And Joel, fortunately, had been to Portugal as a tourist the summer before, and I was looking to do something international. And it's a long story, but basically, he just kept hammering me about Portugal. And I knew nothing about Portugal. I'd never been to Europe. I didn't speak the language. I had no heritage connection. And I just kind of like, Portugal, Joel, why would I go to Portugal? I don't know anything about Portugal. And he just kept after me. And long story short, he's the reason I ended up coming here in the first place. And 36 years later, who would have guessed, But anyways, Joel, I'm really psyched that you could be here. Joel is he's from the Institute for International Education, whose numbers make up the Open Doors report, and they're kind of the leading organization for IE. He is going to tell you a bit of his his path, this unexpected detours that if there's anybody that I think of, who's a lesson in sort of how to manage the emergencies that come up in an international office, it's Joel. He's going to tell you about his experience in Russia and now how he ended up in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan has been mentioned several times already in the Central Asian republics. I think he's also going to tell us a little bit about why you should have your eyes, even though FLAD's mission obviously is U.S. focused. I thought it also was another really interesting niche to this conference to have somebody who could shed some light on a less known country in Portugal for international student recruitment. So Joel, thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me come back around the back here. Okay. Guess I'll be the only one who's using the podium. Yeah, it's really great to be back here. I think I came 36 years ago, and I actually found a job for myself, and I didn't take it. I told Michael about it, and he took the job, and I was studying Soviet and East European studies in Glasgow at the time, but won a full scholarship to go to the University of Toronto, where I got my doctorate in political science. And so I decided to go there and to continue with, the love of my life professionally, which was studying the Soviet Union at the time, and onward with Russia, post-Soviet politics. Sometimes I think if I'd followed Michael's path, he's in a pretty good spot. I took, I guess, maybe a more difficult road. Some people say that history, for Michael, I think it's been one good thing after another, but for Russia, at first it was great, but then it kind of got to be one damn thing after another. So that'll be part of what I'll be describing today. We've said a lot about IIE already, so I won't go into too much detail, but it's an organization that was founded in 1919. It's now 105 years old. It was founded just after the end of World War II to support scholars who had been displaced by war. Unfortunately, we're still doing that. That's one of the main things we do, but we do a lot of different things. We look to engage in countries in ways that will help advance their economies. We have a center for women in leadership that my boss actually directs. So that's a big part of what we do. Thinking a lot about inclusiveness is very important for us. And here's our global presence. You'll see that there is no Moscow office anymore. I'm going to start my presentation a bit about that story. But we actually have established an office in Almaty. Cheryl was telling you a little bit about that, the experience that Lehigh has already had in Almaty. That picture she had of the students in the room, I was actually in that room too. Really excited about the student projects that were being described. It was really great. So what happened in Russia? I'll go through that before I take you to Kazakhstan. Actually, the Fulbright program in Russia, which I directed for 11 years, started out in 1972-73, following these historic talks between Richard Nixon and Leonid Brezhnev, the General Secretary of the Soviet Union at the time. And from that, the Fulbright program, it started actually with just sending Soviet scholars to the United States, but eventually it became a two-way exchange. Interestingly, the first 6 scholars who were sent to the United States, I understand, were KGB agents, and all of them were flipped, actually, interestingly enough. And indeed, prior to the start of the Fulbright program, a great story, Eleanor Roosevelt actually hosted a Russian who was researching the United States. And the research topic was basically, why didn't the United States become a socialist country? We had a Great Depression. And there was potentially a real move in that direction, but it didn't occur. But Sivachov, I can't remember his first name, was an Americanist scholar, and he actually ended up living with Eleanor Roosevelt when he was doing his research. And so part of these exchange experiences, in the classic sense, is spending a long period of time in a country, getting to know people really well. I like to say that it isn't really an exchange experience unless you get depressed. I think that's a big part of going through that period of adaptation. But please bear with me as I go through Russia. I do have things that I think are going to be really relevant to the people who are sitting in this room. and you'll see what I mean in a moment. I think you can see me there in the front with a big smile on my face. That's Moscow 2013, when I was just starting out as director of the Fulbright program. I have a big smile on the face, partly because it was my dream to direct Fulbright in Russia. I finally got the opportunity in 2013. You'll see with me, I think, is at least 200 years of combined international program experience. So the office was really, really capable, so capable that they could basically cover up any of my weaknesses and just allow me to do the things that I really like to do, which was visit Russian universities and tell them about the Fulbright program, conduct interviews with Russians to select them for the program. I think in my career, including what I did for another organization in Russia, I think I've probably interviewed close to 10,000 Russian students. I'm sorry for the Russian there. But this is the Russian International Education Administrators Program, a program funded. It's one of the Fulbright portfolio programs. I like this because you're seeing a map, basically, of all the most populous parts of Russia. You'll see that in the north, you'll get northern more cities, but as you get into Siberia, things tend to stay to the south for reasons I probably don't need to explain. It gets very cold in the north. But in all of these places, we were selecting Russian international education administrators, people that are in very similar roles to your own, and sending them to the United States for training. But also, all of these cities were places from which we would draw scholars, master's degree students, to go to the United States. And every year, for most of the years that I was working on the program in Russia, we were sending about 130 Russians to the United States. So it was a huge program for Fulbright. And then we were placing about 70 Americans throughout Russia. About half of them were English teaching assistants who were teaching English at universities in Russia. It's a very popular program, and one that I think to this day, teaching English is really important, maybe not so much in Portugal anymore, but in general, because as I'll talk a bit more about Kazakhstan, it's a real bottleneck for U.S. universities to partner with universities in Kazakhstan or elsewhere, because for the sort of things that you need to do to maybe increase the level of the universities you're working with, you need to do research together, you need to publish in English, et cetera, and without that English language expertise, it's difficult. So, here's the sad part of the story. I'll just kind of go through these kind of quickly, but when Putin was elected in 2020, or actually, let me correct myself, when he was appointed in the year 2000, he basically became obsessed with dismantling all the progress toward something like a democratic transition for Russia, a market-based economy, basically free journalism, all the things that we think about when we're talking about something like maybe a social democratic state in this case. Crimea only accelerated that, and then, of course, by 2022, with a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, it became more and more difficult for us to work. Even in 2018, our office was cited by the Ministry of Justice as being out of scope. So we had to open an LLC to do all the work that was cited as out of scope, which worked pretty well until 2020. When I was called into the Moscow prosecutor's office, 2 3-hour interviews in a row regarding all the things that we were doing in Russia, I was able to handle that pretty well because already from 2017, I had what we call a curator, a KGB officer who would meet with me regularly, and that was interesting. I thought maybe it was a bit naive that the conversation we were having might be helpful to the continuation of our programs. I used to like to tell him that think of Fulbright kind of like our cooperation in space. Working together can advance science. And he'd nod his head, and as they often do, they kind of reflect back on you what they think is what you want to hear. But then I learned from my landlord in late 2019 that some firemen had been to my apartment, and I was on the top floor, and they were very interested in the attic. They were very interested in the fourth floor apartment where I lived. He asked them for the identification. They showed it to him, and they weren't firemen. They were from our friendly KGB, and one of the persons on that identification was the person who had been interviewing me since 2017. So from about 2020 until late into 2022, I was in Russia until December of 2022. I had to imagine myself potentially being under video surveillance at home. So that's kind of just part of what it was like to work there, and why I was finally happy to work for an organization like IIE, which enabled us to move our office to Kazakhstan. Our idea actually moving to Almaty was that we would continue to run the Fulbright program from there, and we basically were planning to pay our Russian team members while they remained in Russia, but we would be basically administering the program from a safer shore, as I call it. We did name our office that we registered there as a local NGO, STEP Global Education, in part because the STEP is a geographic area that really unites the entire region. It turned out the Kazakhs just love that name. But it was also to kind of hide from Russia a little bit, so they wouldn't know that it was just another IIE office. Things you should know about Kazakhstan: it's a huge country. It's the 8th largest in the world. It's got the world's coldest capital, not where we chose to be, partly my idea, but it is in Astana, their new capital that they established in the north of the country. In the wintertime, it's minus 40 with really strong winds. So I don't think that you would necessarily want to go there. Something that actually, it's a very young country. Only after the region in general is just behind Africa for being the fastest growing region demographically. And I think that's really significant. Michael mentioned how Portugal, the birth rate's declining. I think basically throughout Europe, the same thing. And actually, in the United States, we're right behind you. We're all looking at a precipice of students. And so I think the idea of working with a country that is exploding in terms of its population could be really beneficial, assuming that we can come to terms with the idea of working with nations that might be sending their students to us, and maybe they'll be staying, which I think would be a really great thing, but unfortunately, not everyone agrees, including someone who's running for office, I won't say his name, in the United States. Kazakhstan is also really interesting now because of where it is. You've got Russia to the north. I'll talk more about that in a bit. It kind of continues to give some excitement, not in a good sense, to working in the region. Having this northern neighbor means that Kazakhstan has to basically, that we're kind of on a knife's edge there. And remember, I don't know if you recall, that just before the invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, Russian special forces had been in Almaty, Kazakhstan in January. So that's kind of always on everyone's mind as they try to steer this middle path. China is very involved in the region. You all know about the Belt and Road? Well, that goes through Kazakhstan. In fact, I recently learned that Kazakhstan established a port on the Pacific in China to be part of basically the conveyance of goods through what they call this middle corridor, which, if memory serves, it's at least 2 weeks faster to ship Chinese goods through Kazakhstan onto Europe than it would be to put it all on a ship, go through the Suez Canal, and get to Holland. So it's really important in that respect. in terms of its economic priorities, I think a lot of them are yours too. I'll talk more about this in a second, but mining, agriculture, healthcare, for everybody, internet communication, AI, these are all really important areas for them as they seek to develop their country. I think it could be leverage points for all of us, maybe Portugal in particular, for reasons I'll get to in a second, to be more engaged with Kazakhstan. So here's the thing. When you go to Almaty, which is a wonderful city, there's not many places that are located right next to mountains that are that high. Michael, as a skier, you know, if you stepped out of your hotel in your ski gear, you could be on the slopes in 20 minutes because the mountains are so close. They have the highest ski resort, or highest skating rink in the world, very close by, where world records are set in speed skating since the Soviet days because of the high altitude, the less wind resistance, etc. But here's the problem: water. They don't have a lot of it. They're downstream from their main sources, which are not in their landlocked country. It comes from Uzbekistan. They have a growing population. They're putting a lot of money into education. Their young people are getting better and better educations. It's a trilingual country. Kazakh, Russian, and English now are the 3 official languages they have. So there's a lot of reason to be positive. But if they don't solve this water problem with this exploding population, not just Kazakhstan, but Central Asia in general is going to explode. I think that the State Department understands this. Uzbekistan, the neighbor next door, which has twice the population of Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan's about 18, 19 million. Median age, I think I had it in the slide before, of 29.6 years. They're even younger. They have double the population. They're close to 40 million. Uzbekistan is the second highest recipient of public affairs, public diplomacy funds in the world, just after Pakistan, a country of 400 million. That's how strategically important the region is. So the Ministry of Science and Higher Education has done quite a bit to face the challenges that Kazakhstan has in front of it for its development: water, IT, STEM fields, agriculture. It wants to be the Central Asian international education hub. It wants to brand itself as really a place, instead of Russia, which, by the way, no longer receives many students from Kazakhstan. Russia has left the Bologna process. As I like to say, unfortunately, international education is treated in Russia now as basically like an illicit drug. And if you're running an international education program, you might as well say, "My name is El Chapo," because you will be in trouble. Dual degree programs, international campuses are a big part of their thrust. I'll show a slide in a moment. I totally agree with what Paulo has said about the importance of dual degree programs, international partnerships. But I would like to say that in this Kazakh instance, it's a higher level of risk, and I'll get on to more of that in a second. Also, for now 30 years, the Bolishok program, I don't know if you've heard of the Bolishok program. That might be something that will be of interest to Portugal, especially now, all that's happened with you. But for 30 years, they've been sending quite a number of graduate level students, mostly to the United States, mainly to Great Britain, other places less so, to get master's degrees or scholars as part of their 500 scholar program to do research, internships. All of these things are a big part of what they're trying to do. Here's kind of a map of all the international partnerships that now exist. The University of Arizona is in the north, in Petropavlovsk. That's been a pretty well-known program where they've actually built with the Kazakhs a campus. The Ministry of Education is obsessed with getting U.S. institutions to build campuses in Kazakhstan or to develop dual degree programs. I don't like the idea, to tell you the truth. I think that the risk is so high. The campus that University of Arizona is housed in is right next to the border with Russia. I don't know if I would want to send my kid there if I was an American parent or any parent. But also they depend wholly on Ministry of Education funding, something that could end at any time. So the stability isn't maybe what it could be. That's why what Cheryl was talking about, COIL, or what we sometimes call CURE, this collaborative undergraduate research exchange. I think that these are maybe the best way to go, this collaborative learning and hybrid learning. I think we've learned in part from COVID might be the best way for us to approach international education in the future, especially in a region like this that has black swans, as I showed you with a prior slide. And let's face it, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm not, that all of us in international education are going to have to learn to continue to pivot quickly, whether it be a weather event, a political event, whether it be a pandemic. We need to find ways to pivot, and I think it makes it easier when you have blended learning to adapt quickly, to adjust quickly to the challenges you might face. Here's just some illustration of the Bolshak program and what all that it's done. It already has almost 13,000 alumni. It's been really a pretty great success. It has had some weaknesses, though, and I'll address that now. When IE established itself in Kazakhstan, we won a grant from the U.S. Embassy there to establish a university partnership program. We opened up the program with a different strategy than our predecessor, which had been all about creating opportunities for collaboration in a bilateral format between U.S. and Kazakh universities. We decided to do things a little differently. We wanted to open a consortium. I like the consortium idea. I think that it has a lot of strengths that aren't part of just bilateral relationships. I think there's resilience as one. I think it gives the opportunity to not just focus on a partnership for a Kazakh university with a really big name U.S. university, but for smaller universities on both sides, both for the Kazakhs and for the U.S. or other universities. When you have a consortium, I think it gives all of its members special opportunities to benefit from network effects. I'll talk more in a second about that. But this consortium was mainly focused on renewable energy, agriculture, STEM, and IT. We have universities within the consortium that have really great specialization in those areas. And in agriculture, University of Nebraska, for example, I just learned recently, has more land under irrigation than any region in the United States. And for Kazakhstan, this is significant because Nebraska actually has a special water center there that was established by a company called Valmont. And I think you probably have these in Portugal, a system of watering that's basically on a pivot. See it rotating around? Well, that was the idea to introduce that into Kazakhstan because this pivot-based irrigation systems cut water use by 80%, which obviously would be really significant for a country like Kazakhstan because they need to cut their use of water. The problem, though, is that the larger infrastructure of water doesn't facilitate the implementation of these sort of pivot systems, only in certain places. So one of the things we're focusing on is trying to create a strategy for water for Kazakhstan. And the nice thing about a consortium is that when you think about all the universities put together within that consortium, you have more resources than any of the great universities in the world. And so when you have a consortium, you have the ability to leverage the attention of, say, a Ministry of Education, or maybe leadership at the state level. Cheryl's talked about that to me already, or at the national level. So again, that's one of the ideas we have, is why not use this consortium to approach the Ministry of Education or higher levels of government in Kazakhstan to come to better agreements regarding how they could run their own scholarship programs. For example, more efficient placement of their students throughout either universities that are part of the consortium in the United States or other universities, or collaboration on major research projects that might distribute among the US universities the opportunity to work with Kazakh researchers in ways that would make it more likely that what they write will be published in international journals, which will raise the rating of those Kazakh universities and just create positive forward cycles of development. I know that we're kind of running out of time, so I'll go through these slides kind of quickly. COVID, as I've already stressed, changed everything. It changed me. I mean, I hated these ideas of online learning. I was trained in part because the funding we would get was all based on sending people or receiving students for really large amounts. But frankly, even Fulbright now, the scholarships aren't enough, nor are they enough for the Bolshevik program. The last time I did an orientation for students preparing to leave Russia, one person raised their hand and said, you know, I'm going to Pepperdine, and Malibu's really expensive. And what would you think of my living in my car when I'm living in the United States for a year? And it's getting to the point now where we're actually cutting scholarships so that there can be more money in each individual scholarship. So that's why now COIL, CURE, combined with maybe shorter term stays wherever a person is going is actually better. It makes us more resilient. If there's problems, we can adapt more easily, and just more people can be involved. And I think, again, that now inclusiveness in this world we have, where I hope I'm wrong, but I think that there's going to be another pandemic or another aggression of one country to another. Maybe it's going to be an AI disaster or something like this that's going to require us to pivot very quickly. And I think that the best way to do that is to have multiple approaches to international education. We've seen in prior slides, these are kind of the major players in terms of partnerships. Would love to see Portugal being one of those leaders. Maybe we can make that happen. Partnerships, again, have been the most common form of collaboration. I think if there's one takeaway that I'd like you to have from me today, think about a consortium. I think that when we had a visiting group that included Cheryl's recently, I was really motivated by the level of collaboration that was being talked about by the members visiting, and this idea of having a community of practice. Already they'd set up on LinkedIn a community of practice that had already hundreds of participants. I think all that, if you're not doing it now, I hope you will, because I think it would really work for Portugal. Actually, when I saw your map, I realized that maybe you're getting a lot of students from Angola, for example. They speak Portuguese, makes lots of sense. That's further away than Kazakhstan, so it's really far away. And so again, I think this would be a great place. The rules of Bolshevik have changed. It used to be that, we will only want to send our students to the very top US universities, Harvard, MIT, blah, blah, blah. I hate that kind of conversation, but it happens. But now they've switched to, if you're, say, studying ethnomusicology, if that university in Portugal is one of the top 100 in ethnomusicology, they'll send a Bolsheviker there if they want to go. So maybe you could have someone come to you. And again, I think the consortia idea, IIE's Center for International Partnerships is really advocating this already for over 20 years. Global E3, an engineering consortium, has existed. And I'm thinking that our consortium, if we development, will become eventually kind of a consortium of consortia, because it's just so natural for people to align themselves based on their academic area of interest. And again, it's just really exciting for a place like Kazakhstan that has small, more regional universities that might be doing really interesting things in your area. The domra, for example, an instrument that's just it's a national religion. Music places that would never have a chance to be a part of an international program, a consortium enables that. So again, just be thinking about that, because I think it could be really exciting for Portugal. I'm going to just zip through these because I know that we're kind of close on, and I think I've kind of hit all these points already. But let's stay in touch. I hope that I'll see, it won't be another 34 years before I see Michael again, because he's a really great guy. You're really lucky to have him here. And I hope it's maybe 34 days, maybe, or less, that I can come back, because this is a great country. I've come from California, and when I'm here, I feel at home. I know that there's a big Portuguese diaspora in California. You know, I've gone to school with students named Silva, for example. What's the word? Tuguese? If you're Portuguese, Tugues. I know Tugues. Yeah, and so it's really a place that I think could be not only a great host to U.S. students, God bless them, but also students from a place like Kazakhstan, who would, I think that what you could do to help them to develop their agriculture system, what you could do to show how Portuguese culture has been a place that people really revere and love. It could be the same with Kazakh, and so, or Uzbek. So please come to Central Asia. I can think of strategies that we could develop. One, it's not hard to see the Minister of Education there or other prominent people in education. If you came with a group with Michael, for example, I could be helpful. If you want to find a low-cost way to explore the idea of Portugal being involved with either accepting Bolshak students or placing some of your own students at their universities, I think if a few of you got together and went to see the Portuguese ambassador here, he would be very happy to see you, or she. If it's a she, I don't know who it is. They would be very happy. And I think that they would find it wonderful to discuss with you the idea of including in your programs Kazakhstan and or say Central Asia more broadly. Thank you for your attention.
You all know we're running quite late compared to what was the original schedule. And this is going against everything that I want from the forum, which is to have all kinds of Q&A and interaction between the audience and the speakers. But I'm going to ask that at least for this first panel, that we maybe do the Q&A over lunch. And that you just walk up to people and ask them what your questions are. Because we have my colleague Elsa Henriques wants to say some words about the Berkeley, FCT, and FLAD collaboration, which is a very important one that has some new wrinkles. And then we're going to have Denise presenting the USAPT campus sort of project, and how the Agência Nacional is collaborating with Fulbright and with FLAD. We're going to keep them short, we promise. I mean, everybody's hungry and wants to get to lunch upstairs. But again, thanks to our three speakers. I thought it was great. And hopefully you'll get lots of questions at lunch. Thank you. No, I think we can stay up. It's okay.
Okay, so I promise I'm going to be short. Okay, I know that you are hungry for lunch, so I'm going to be very synthetic. But I believe it's important to have here some words about a new program in Portugal. We call it Portugal Berkeley Program. And that is not yet launched, but is going to be launched in a short time, I believe. At Berkeley, the Center for Portuguese Studies exists since '94, And since its very beginning, FLAD, Luso-American Foundation for Development, has been one of the main sponsors, supporting financially the center at Berkeley. The center is not the department, so it's something that exists. It's very small and exists inside the Institute for European Studies at Berkeley. And the idea is to have there some connection point for Portugal that promotes the language, promotes the culture, but also any interaction that happen during that 30 years of time between Portuguese academia and University of Berkeley. And we all know that in our schools, we always have 1, 2, 3 colleagues of ours that can come to us saying that, okay, I developed my PhD at University of California at Berkeley. So the idea was that I can present you some highlights about the work at CPS, the Center for Portuguese Studies. Is the only examination center for CAIPOL exam, which is a certification for Portuguese as a foreign language, and that's the instrument most widely used to certify the proficiency in Portuguese language. Of course, that kind of exam is controlled by University of Lisbon in Portugal, but is being done in different parts of the world. One of those places is at the University of Berkeley. There is a Cátedra Ana Atterley, which is supported by Camões to promote not only Ana Atterley, but also everything that is connected to the Portuguese literature and the different authors and poets that can visit Berkeley at different points. FLAD has also a direct connection with the center, and we promote visiting researchers at Berkeley. So I'm talking about young researchers, mostly PhD students that have the opportunity to spend at least a year at University of Berkeley. Of course, most of those students have already a scholarship from our national science agency, but we know that to live in Berkeley is difficult, very expensive, and so most of the students cannot afford to go to California only with the normal international scholarship from FCT. There is another thing that is very important at UC Berkeley, which is the Fundo Pinto Fialon. That's a fund that was established since several years ago by Arthur Ferreira Pinto, and you can notice a Portuguese name, and his wife, Annette Fialon. Both were alumni at Berkeley, and when they died, they left a significant amount of money to University of Berkeley. And because Arthur is Portuguese, he decided that that money only can be attributed to Portuguese students, or at least descendants of Portuguese descendant students. The fund has values currently 4.5 million euros. Of course, it is applied in the capital market, and the rentability of the fund can be used year after year, so every year, to provide scholarships to Portuguese students. And what you know is that normally the rentability of the fund can provide to students $500,000 per year, and half of this $500,000 is normally managed by the Center for Portuguese Students. So any Portuguese or Portuguese descendant student that goes to University of Berkeley has the opportunity to apply to have a scholarship supported by that fund, and it's not difficult to get some support. Also, that fund has can support students, not Portuguese students, but any student from University of Berkeley that wants to have a study abroad experience in Portugal, or is to study some Portuguese-related aspect. So if a PhD student, a master student, a bachelor student decide to come to Portugal, to a Portuguese university to develop some kind of research, he has the opportunity to apply to the fund and to be supported financially to come to Portugal. And based on that, because there is a strong connection, because there is a long time connection with the Center for Portuguese Studies and at University of Berkeley, and because the fund exists, okay, but can only be expanded with Berkeley students, okay. We signed it recently, 2023, a memo of understanding between FCT, the National Science Foundation, FLAD, and University of Berkeley, and we signed that memo of understanding to encourage and facilitate international collaboration on topics of mutual academic interest. Portugal-Berkeley program is under preparation. It is foreseen to be launched in the beginning of 2025, so I'm talking about a couple of months from now. And it involves not only FCT but also FLAD. The Center for Portuguese Studies is going to be the operational point at Berkeley to run and to manage that, that program. That also runs, and that center, as you know, also runs the Pinto Fialong funds. So there is here a mix of funds, not only to allow Portuguese students to go to Berkeley, but also to allow Berkeley students to come to Portugal. The goal is to promote studies relating to Portugal and the Portuguese American community, and exchanges and research collaborations among Portuguese universities and Berkeley on any scientific and academic subject, of course, of mutual interest. And we have lots of mutual interests between Portugal and California, who are similar. We have the same climate change issues, we have the same problems with fires, we have the same problem with water, we have the same problem with renewables energies. So for sure, you are going to have here lots of subjects in which faculty from Berkeley and faculty from Portugal can work together. The program has been established to allow advanced training. So we are talking about PhD students. We are talking about master and PhD students, not at the licenciatura level. We are going to have mixed PhD research studentships. The maximum for 2 years of a permanence of the Portuguese student at University of Berkeley, or vice versa. Or we are going to have another thing, which is the PhD research studentships abroad at Berkeley. Knowing that, on top of the scholarship provided by the National Science Foundation, there is another scholarship provided by Berkeley. And another thing that I strongly believe is the FCT mobility, to be launched by the end of October to support the co-orientation of PhD students by a professor, a faculty from Berkeley, and a faculty from Portugal. Okay? And that student can be a student in our universities in Portugal or a student at Berkeley. Okay? The idea is to have those students here and there supported, oriented by at least 2 professors, 1 year one there. And in that situation, okay, in that situation, there are, on top of the scholarships for the students, support and financial support to allow that the supervisor here can take some time at Berkeley and vice versa. The professor at Berkeley to have a permanence in Portugal, not a long permanence, but a couple or three months per year, okay? So that's the idea. My name is Elsa Henriques. My mail, I know, most of you know me. And I think I have here two persons, Ana Quartin, and, okay, I was not seeing you, but for sure lots of questions are going to come to your minds about how it will work. But during lunchtime, we can answer all the questions. If you know, we know the answers to you. Thank you.
So we just made an executive decision. I thank the people in the back who helped make that executive decision, that we're going to have Denise go at the end of today, because we actually, in the final panel, we actually have fewer presentations than we originally had anticipated, so it works well. I think we can still be on schedule by the end of the day for what we plan, and everybody's hungry. So I hope you enjoyed these first couple. Denise, thanks for being so flexible, for doing this and allowing us to reprogram you. So we're going to actually enjoy lunch for those of you who are staying for lunch. I hope you all can join us. We're going to go up, I think, the outside steps. I'll lead the way if you like. But if you want to take a group photo or group photos upstairs, the view is very nice and the sun has come out for us. So that's all. And you can leave your things here. Yeah, it's safe.